You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
Looking good, you're bald and beautiful. But I just want to say, calling Big Honey, this is Doc Malik on Open Frequency. Do you read me? Over.
This is Big Honey, over. I got you 5 by.
Why are you called Big Honey?
Well, I set up a team to take them across the U.S. southern border, and we had a big truck with thermals and like a giraffe telescope that went up. How far did that thing go up? It was like 10 meters or more. It was pretty high. I think it was higher than that actually. And but it had a good thermal. You could see through people's clothes to tell if it's a man or a woman. Like half mile or more away or a mile away. We could see many, many miles with that thing. We were over at SpaceX and that sort of thing. And so I had multiple different teams that were watching the border so that we could just basically tell people what's going on at the border. So we needed radio call signs. And so since I was running the thing, I went by Big Honey 6, because 6 is the appellate that you put on for commander, right, in the military. So I was just Big Honey 6. So so then I shortened that to Big Honey. But it was interesting because, we were at SpaceX and, I went across the entire southern border myself with different groups, sometimes just alone. But that took many, many months, and watching the invasions come through. And, because SpaceX is on one of the edges of the border in the Gulf of Mexico, that's where they launch a lot of their rockets. Of course, they have a launch facility in Florida as well, and in California, and I think in other places as well. But the one in Texas is right at the mouth of the Rio Grande, right on the border of Mexico. Like literally, the Mexico side is literally dangerously close to the rockets. And I mean, like, no kidding, dangerously close. And so, but that's the border, because the Rio Grande River is the border, or Rio Bravo, as Mexicans call it, is the border of, United States and Mexico. And it's interesting because there you have literally aliens coming across the border into SpaceX property, while aliens are preparing to go to Mars from SpaceX property. And interestingly, the last battle of the U.S. Civil War, almost nobody seems to know this. The last battle of the U.S. Civil War was right there on what is now SpaceX property. A lot of people, even a lot of kind of amateur Civil War historians don't know much about that. But there's actually plaques up there. And anyway, it's quite interesting, isn't it? It's a little piece of land. There used to be Indians out there that were said to be cannibals, and in the whole works, they used to apparently put seaweed on their bodies and run around naked. And America's a crazy, wild place.
Who knows? Dude, I know I've been down to the Big Bend National Park and the Rio Grande, although I have to admit, by the time it's down there, there's nothing grand about it. It's like little piddly little stream. And I saw people crossing over from Mexico. It's just like walking right past us. And we were like, what? This is wild. Like literally
Total
no
invasion.
One's there, no border, just people crossing over, like literally in front of us. Well, we're like, wow, anyway, it's crazy. But listen, we need to talk about a few things. And I want to talk about, I never heard about the Darien Gap until I heard you mention it. I was like, what is this Darien Gap? Where is this Darien Gap? Down south somewhere. But you mentioned something yesterday when you were talking to me about the Scottish involvement. Mate, I went to bed late last night because I was busy reading about William Patterson and this absolutely
Patterson.
Absolutely doomed venture. Like in this late 1600s, the Scots are like, man, the English, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, they've got this colonial business working out for them. They're making shit ton of money. We need to get in on this act. We're already behind the scenes. So they muster up 25% of Scotland's wealth, put it in this Scottish company to mimic, the East India Company. And then this epic failed venture kicks off. Do you want to just talk about that for a second?
Oh, yeah. The Darien, there's different names that's been given to it, like the Darien scheme. So Darien, by the way, Darien, Panama used to be called the Isthmus of Darien. Nobody quite knows where that name came from. There's a lot of people argue about it. But anyway, it's called the Darien Isthmus, right? The Isthmus. There you go. So, and then they started calling it the Isthmus of Panama and that sort of thing. So, so the Darien Gap is that, you see all those blue lines for me on the right of the screen, those blue lines, that's coming across from Colombia through what's called the Darien Gap. You see that red line is the Pan American Highway, and it ends down there in a town called Yavita. And so so there's no road all the way to Colombia from there. So that's why they call it the Gap, because there's no road for about 100 kilometers, right?
Right.
And actually, not many years ago, that Darien Gap would start way up there, closer to where the Panama Canal is. I mean, so it's only been in recent times that they've even opened that. I'm down there all the time, like all those red, blue lines. I've been on all of them, right? And so, I mean, I've been all over that place. I've spent a year in Panama since the time that. Actually, you see San Vicente, that ETRM right there. That's one of the main camps. I call that China camp, actually. And Lajas Blancas, that's also a major. It's not really a camp. It's more like it's almost a bus stop, because after the aliens come through the Darien Gap, they come through Colombia, and at least 1.4 million, roughly, let's say 1.4 million that I can actually defend, came through since Biden was installed. So the reason I can say that is because we have records of about 1.1 million that came through, and there's some months that are missing. So if we have to extrapolate the missing months, but it's only a few months, but it would be roughly 1.4, right? So that would be a defensible number that actually have come through during the time that Biden was in. So they just go across that jungle, a terrible jungle, huge death toll. And I would say when we first started going there, which is like 5 years ago or so now, I'll bet you it was a 10% death toll. And then over time, it got to be less than 1%, certainly less than 1%. And when I would go down there with Masako, who's running around here right now, my wife, and Chuck Holton and some others. We would go down there. And at one point, we're like, I'm like, this is a huge death toll. And, I asked Chuck and Masako, what's your estimate? Because there's nobody that really knows. There was no objective numbers to go with. But we're just going off of what all these people are, telling us. Like, I just stepped over a body this morning or whatever. 40 people were in our group and 20 drowned actually, one group had 40 and 20 drowned the night before. This was normal stuff, right? Back in the earlier days, just like 4 or 5 years ago. And then they started making it more corporate, and then the death toll, while still high, was certainly less than 1%. But
okay. Just stop 1 second. I've got so many questions, mate. Just hold on 1 second. Slow down. So I'm gonna extract all your knowledge from you, but I've got tons of questions. But one of the things you're saying is not much has changed, because back in the late 1600s, when they formed the Scottish Company to go out and colonize this part of the territory, I mean, the Spanish weren't very happy, but the reason why they could pick this area is, one, because it was a narrow isthmus, and this guy Patterson was thinking, great, we can tie up the Pacific trade and then the Atlantic trade and make our money that way. But the thing is, the reason why there weren't that many people there was he didn't appreciate from the sea, that it's full of marshland and jungle, and even though it's 70 miles across, it's very harsh, it's inhospitable, you can't grow anything. So the Scots 300 years ago were starving to death, getting diseased, and were being harassed by the Spanish. And that's why they're driven out eventually. Yep. And out of 2,500 colonists, only about 300 limped back home. It bankrupted Scotland, and then they ended up, like you said to me, joining the Union. And the English, I mean, it just goes to show you
1707.
Yeah, yep. The bankers never changed. So what happened was all the rich merchants and bankers like Patterson, who lost all the money, well, they got reimbursed by the English Crown. The English Crown said, look, you support our Act of Union and we'll pay you back. So the bankers got their ultimate in their bailout. The colonists got nothing. They died. And actually, after the Act of Union, there were higher taxes placed on the Scots to pay for everything. So it just shows you bailing out the banks is nothing new. But anyway, going back to this Darien Gap, what I want to know is like a couple of things, right? One, when did this migrant invasion actually start? Was it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? And the next question is like, why here at this point? Why Colombia? And who is it? Is it Chileans and Bolivians? Or is it Chinese? And if it's Afghans and Kurds? how are they getting there? Like, who are the people coming over, and who's bringing them to Colombia, and why there, and when did it all start?
I literally could teach a class on this. So, I mean, I could teach a month class on this with global maps and show you and answer all those questions in minutia. So, in summary, but you know, even okay, let's go macro on, let's say, wide angle on time frame and on geography. Wide angle on time frame and geography.
Yeah.
You know, changing the lens on our camera. And so why Panama? Panama, you know, when Christopher Columbus and finally others like Balboa started, you know, first Christopher Columbus and this others, you know, started coming over. First they thought they had found India, of course. And then, you know, Balboa and others, they trekked across. There you go. They trekked across the Darien Gap. They trekked across. And they found, if you look at Panama on that map, that's, you know, right down there connecting to South America, it actually goes mostly east-west, actually. A lot of people think it goes north-south. So what I'm saying next is important to that. So Panama, you see the long axis is actually east-west, right? And so again, a lot of people think it's north-south. So Balboa trekked across. Actually, you know, when you showed that previous map, can you go back to the previous map? And the one that has the let's see, well, never mind. But it had all the roads and the you know, like the Pan American Highway. There you go, that one. You see Cartagena on the north side there, and it's got those, you know, blue boat lines going to it from Colombia. I've actually taken that by boat. But you go just a little bit to the west up there, and near where it says Bajo Chiquito. If you kept going up a little bit more, Balboa, he actually took his boats apart and walked across. You know, these were the kind of guys they were, right?
Wow.
He, like, took the boats apart, trekked across, reassembled the boats and that sort of stuff. But anyway, down in Darien Province, they didn't call it Darien Province back then. It was just like the big bad jungle. And but when they he got up on a hill down there in Darien, and he saw the other ocean. He saw the Pacific. Now, he called it the South Sea. So he called it the South Sea, and he claimed it for Spain, right? So he claimed it for Spain. He's like, this is mine. That's how he ended up being made the governor of Darien, actually. And so the king of Spain made Balboa the governor of Darien. And eventually he would be killed in Darien. He would be beheaded also in that area by the next governor. So in any case, the you know, the games always have been going on. But he called it the South Seas because he's like, this is it. Now, if we can just make a path between these seas, and so many different expeditions, nobody would ever know the numbers. We're trying. One thing that's very important too is that Panama is filled with gold, and it's some of the best quality gold on planet Earth. It's still out there, and it's thick, right? There's poems and songs about it. And remember, the Spanish and the Portuguese in this area, it was the Spanish because in the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas, this was on the west side of the treaty, and so that means this was all allegedly belonged to Spain. So that's why the Spanish were so much in Panama, and that's why they speak Spanish today, right? It was because on the Treaty of Tordesillas from Pope Alexander VI, you know, everything basically west of Brazil was Spanish, and then on the other side was Portuguese. That's why Brazil speaks Portuguese today. And so anyway, down in Panama, this was Spanish, so you had a bunch of conquistadors running around there, fighting the Indians, trying to get that gold. They were killing each other back and forth. And actually, the army that would end up fighting the Aztecs assembled down there in Darien and went down. So this is the history in Panama is absolutely over the top. The greatest British explorers and whatnot, you know, fighting it out down there. It was epic. And so a lot of people don't realize that, though. And then so this was all going on, and then the Scottish were like, next up the bat, we can make a path between the seas. Now, the concept of the operation, now keep in mind, this was going on, Columbus made his first journey over to the Americas in 1492, and then they started coming back and more, you know, the ant went back to the nest and said, hey, we found this stuff, right? And the next thing you know, and more ships are being built, and they're on their way, right? And so it wasn't very long that they discovered this is a way you could get to that other sea, right? The South Sea is what they called it, right? And so that's when, so that was in the early 1500s. And now we fast forward to about 170 years, and the Scottish are like, okay, we're up to bat. It's our turn. We can do it. Now, the concept of the operation was sound. It was very smart. Had the Scottish succeeded, I mean, you may have been absorbing England, right? It might be the United Kingdom of Scotland, England, and Wales, right? So, it could have been literally. But so this was a big game, big, go at it. Very wise to try to make it happen. But, they were up against a lot of stuff out there. Malaria that's over the top, so many diseases. I mean, you're a doctor. That, when I went to British tracking school over in Borneo, I went with your military over there with the Gurkhas and all that. And one of the reasons that the British military moved your tracking and jungle school from Belize over to Borneo was because the jungle up in Belize, which is considerably, to the left on that map, it was what they call a dirty jungle. So many of your British Marines and whatnot, I'm talking in recent times, in recent generations, were getting sick from every disease in the world, that they moved that jungle. One of the reasons that they moved it over to Borneo was, was because of the jungle over there is not as dangerous. So when I went to tracking school, with the British military, as a combat tracking actually over there, it was because the jungle was not as dangerous. This jungle is epically dangerous down here, right? In the Darien Gap and that whole Central America. It's just biologically a death zone, And so when the Scottish came over, they stepped into that death zone. That place is filled with ghosts, so many people that had tried. Scottish gave it a good go, a hard go. And, Scottish are hard people, and that jungle's hard too. And so the first go didn't work out. And then the remnant of them, the survivors, started sailing home, while the next Scottish batter was already up, came in, and they got smoked too. Now, keep in mind, I'll bet you the Scottish would have succeeded with the general hard-headedness of them. They would have probably succeeded had the other global powers not been against them. If the Scottish were only fighting the jungle, I think the Scottish would have succeeded. But you had the other globalists, like the English and the Spanish are like, no. So not only did you have to fight the jungle, you had to deal with the English and the Spanish, right?
Yeah, I just want to explain that. So if people don't know the history, what was bizarre was William of Orange, who's this Dutch guy, Protestant, becomes King of England and then Scotland as well. James runs away. He's a Catholic, and the whole Catholic Protestant thing was big then. And so William is waging war with the Spaniards and the Grand Alliance against France. He doesn't want to piss off his Spanish allies. Spain is all of this area that we're looking at the map, and the Scots, who also have the same king, the king of William the King. They go up to England, the ports up in Jamaica and whatnot, saying, look, we need replenishments, we need supplies. And the English are like, no, you're not allowed to even, you're not allowed to port, you're not allowed to come on shore. We can't support you. So the Scots are being screwed by the English, and they never forgave them for that. So the Spanish are, blockading them. The English are not helping them. The relief ships are coming to a jungle full of nowhere. Nothing's there, and they're trying their best to make this little fledgling colony of Caledonia succeed, and it flopped big time. You're right.
I think it would have worked if only one of those enemies were taken off the table, right?
Yeah.
If the English had had you already been part of then anyway, at the end of the day, I think you would have succeeded. You would have taken a lot of casualties because that jungle's no joke, but you would have succeeded, I think. And it would have changed. I mean, Scotland would be very different today. But, it was three significant enemies. That jungle. Actually, weirdly, the Scottish mostly got along with the Kuna Indians, which nobody else seems to be able to do. I mean, I get along with them. I'm out with them all the time. But, I mean, but Americans actually get along with the Kuna well, too. But they hated the Spanish. Because the Spanish were, I mean, straight up burning people alive and all that. They were doing conquistador stuff, right? You should see some of the old artwork by DeBry and all that. I've got some of it. But they were just like, because, again, Panama had a lot of gold. And what were the Spanish doing? They would sail around looking for the rivers of gold, right? There's a book called The Rivers of Gold. But they you go to the mouth of the rivers when you're sailing around, and there's always Indians at the mouth of the rivers. When you go around the world, the river, I mean, when you were doing those early days of conquistador or whatever, if you're Portuguese or German or whatever. Or, Germans doing this, but they would go to the river mouths, obviously, because that was your road into the country. But the Indians along the river banks, if they were wearing a bunch of gold and silver, well, you're going to come back, and you're going to find out where they're getting it. You're going to try to trade with them. If that doesn't work, they would kill them, right? Straight up. And so it was about that gold and silver. And so that led to a lot of fighting, when these, and especially down in Panama. So anyway, so the Scottish actually got along okay with the Kuna, which was good. Otherwise, the Kuna definitely would have killed them. I mean, they still use poison darts out there with them. I go out with them, right? And the Kuna, one Kuna man, he's a village. I don't know if he's still alive because I haven't seen him in 2 or 3 years. But he's 86 or something. I don't remember. He's in his 80s, and so I'm out there in the jungle with him, just me, in his group, and it's on that, area not far away from New Caledonia where the Scottish were. And he comes up. He's walking barefoot. He's showing me the way that the migrante come through, right? The other invaders. And finally, he points to my chest. He goes, "Don't you take that vaccine?" He's like pointing in my chest, right, really close. He's a small Kuna dude, but Kunas are like serious, man. And he's pointing at me. "Don't you take that vaccine?" I said, "I'm not, sir." And I was like, I'm not. And he goes, "When Cinefront," which is like the Panama sort of army/police, very professional people, Cinefront. He said, "When Cinefront came to my village to give this poison, I said, 'Go from my village.'" And I asked Cinefront later, they're like, "Yeah, we just leave him alone." But then he says, "So that we're way out in the jungle, man. There's no road within like 4 days walk or 5 or 6 days walk even. It's a long way to get to a road. Kuna could probably walk it in 3 or 4 days. But so he said, "Why are you in Ukraine?" And I'm like, "I'm not in Ukraine. I'm in the Darien with you." And he goes, "You know what I'm saying." And I was like, I think it's a stupid war too, but in any case, so, we kept talking about the migrante that are coming through, giving his people more sickness and chopping down their coconut trees because they can't climb the tree. Kuna just climb up a coconut tree and get the coconuts. You know what I mean? They don't need ladders or any of that stuff. But a lot of the people coming through, they're hungry and they just, they take their machetes and collectively cut down coconut trees and, for a few coconuts, all these sorts of, if you want to start a war, cut down people's trees, And that started many a war when I was out. Anyway, that's a separate story. But
separate story. So let's stay focused.
Yeah. But but that's how the Scottish, they gave it a good go. It was in that same area. Too many enemies. They had 3 major enemies against them, although they got along with the Kunas. But it was that jungle, the most epic jungle, and the English and the Spanish, and that was why the Scottish ended up bankrupt and you're in their army today.
That guy William Patterson came out with his wife and his kids. He was that confident, but he went back home widowed.
They died.
And widowed and orphaned. I mean, dead, and all of them dead. Anyway, let's go back contemporary. So when did this mass migration start? Who are these people?
Well, this goes back down to the same reason that Balboa was like, "Hey, we can make a path here." What was that, about 1519-ish, something like that? And then the Scottish came in 1690s, gave it a shot. And so many French tried. They went bankrupt too. And the French came with a lot more resources and a lot more knowledge because they came in the late 1800s. And routes and resources. If you look at the big map, going macro on this, on the geography, that's the place to make a canal. The Suez Canal had opened in 1869, and so which became, when the Suez opened, that was the most important place on earth when the Suez opened. But this right here, you see, now if you can open that route right there as an invasion route to the United States, you can dump out a huge amount of South America there, and you can bring people in from Africa and Asia and all over the world, China, into, like, the Chinese will go to Ecuador first mostly. The Haitians mostly go to Venezuela, and then they come through Colombia, and then they go through, the Darien. So we have people from 140, 150 countries come through there. Now, when Biden was installed, I was in Washington, D.C. with Misako at the inauguration, and we flew immediately down to Texas. We flew to El Paso. And let me say something about El Paso and Darien. the continental divide that goes through America. The continental divide is the divide in which if water falls on one side, the water goes to the Atlantic. If it falls on the other, it goes to the Pacific. That continental divide goes all the way from America through El Paso and all the way through Darien. So when the alien invaders are going through the Darien, they actually cross over the same continental divide. So anyway, that's why they call it El Paso.
I've stood on the continental divide.
At El Paso?
No, yeah. And what you call it, Yellowstone?
If you'd have just kept right on walking for like a year, you'd have ended up in the Darien Gap. You would have been fighting all kinds of things, cartel members, desert heat, and then you get down to the jungle and it'd be dengue and malaria and everything else. And but at the end of the day, that's the same continental divide. So anyway, if you look at that map, because war is largely about routes, like the vast majority of big war, certainly big wars, is about routes and resources. That's what it's about. That's why I spend so much. Right outside my window is the Chao Phraya River. I'm in Thailand. That's like the Mississippi of Thailand, right? This is a huge route for resources, right? So Panama, that's again why I spend so much time there and in Netherlands and places like that, is routes and resources. So when Biden was installed, we were at the inauguration, Misako and I, we flew to El Paso, and because we thought, wow, they're going to start flooding in the border, I think. And they did. As soon as within 24 hours, they were just it was like the starting gun. Biden was installed and boom, they started flooding over the borders, and we were getting it on video. So then we flew from El Paso, we flew down to Panama, and then we flew to Colombia. We flew to Colombia and we went down there into the Darien Gap on the Colombia side, and the flow was definitely, it was very dangerous. I could just feel it. And I'm like, you know what? We're pushing the OODA loop here. We're going to get killed. We punched out. We went back to Panama. We flew back to Panama and came down and back into the Darien on the Panama side. And so on the Panama side of the Darien, then I spent about a year there. Since in the last 4.5 years, I spent about a year down there, either in the Darien Gap or on the Panama Canal, because the Panama Canal, Panama itself, whether it be the Darien Gap, and keep in mind the Spanish, in Spanish it's called tampon del Darien. It's the tampon of Darien. They call it the plug. And the reason there's no road down there, now common knowledge is that the reason that there's no road is because it's impossible to make a road, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's easy to make a road there. But you'll have experts all the time say, no, it's impossible to make a road. One guy actually told me, career intel guy, we're standing next to the Panama Canal a few years ago, and he goes, he's been in Panama all his life. He's like, it's impossible to make a road through the Darien. I'm like, your toes are practically in the Panama Canal. This canal, see that ship going through? That's impossible, right? That's like, you know what I mean? All the idea that it's impossible to make a road through the Darien is absolutely ludicrous. It's simple. The reason there's no road through the Darien is because we didn't want it there. We wanted that buffer between South America and us. Firstly, to guard the keep in mind, Panama as a country did not exist until 1903. We created Panama on November 3rd, 1903, the Republic of Panama. We created it so that we could make the canal, right?
Yeah, so I think, just in case, because it's an international audience, but when you say we, you mean the U.S. government, because Panama was actually part of Colombia. It was actually part of Colombia, had been for quite a long time, and the Americans were eyeing it up and going, well, the Colombians aren't going to give it to us. And, I think they were trying to do a trade deal and a deal to make the canal, and the Colombians were like, no, we don't want to. Sorry, ain't going to happen. So, good old-fashioned Americans did a bit of insurgency, color revolution, created Panama, and bingo, Panama said, yeah, you guys can make the canal.
Straight up. In summary, I mean, we already had the railway going across the canal at that point. And I've got all the original studies. Keep in mind, we did very detailed studies in Mexico, Nicaragua, and numerous routes in Panama, including I've got the original studies, including like tunnels through mountains and that sort of thing to make canals in different places. So we did huge study. This took many generations, right? This is very detailed studies, like measuring the specific gravity of the coal there and how much smoke it gives off and all, because this is coal-fired days, right? And, we looked at maps through routes through Colombia. So there's a big political and business fights about where to make the canal. There was so we finally narrowed it down to either Nicaragua or Panama. And then in Panama, there were still various places we could do it. So finally, big information war, to keep it out of Nicaragua. There was, we were saying, watch out for the volcanoes, and we had postage stamps in America made with volcanoes erupting, destroying the canal, stuff like that. I mean, it was epic information war, and they were sending all these letters with these stamps to all the members of Congress, like the volcanoes, and trying to get them to make the canal in Panama. But the one problem with Panama is Panama was Colombia. And so it's like, no problem. We'll either negotiate with Colombia or we will, we'll do it with a crowbar. The Colombians, keep in mind, the Colombians also, it's not like it was historically Colombian either. They were conquistadors that came and took it from the Spanish, from all the Indians. And so then, of course, the Colombians are like, it's like the sedimentary stuff. So, we sponsored that rebellion and it worked. And then in 1914, we opened the Panama Canal, right? And so, but if you look at that, that remains one of the most important places on Earth. That and Suez Canal are two of the most important places on Earth. If there's two places I could control, it would be that and Suez. I mean, and if you wanted to add to that, obviously Strait of Malacca and Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb, Strait of Gibraltar, and Danish Straits and Bosphorus. If you could control those, and the Cape of Good Hope and those sorts of things, you would rule the world. And that's what people are trying to do, is control those. That's why you're going to end up seeing war in Panama. But anyway, Panama is a funnel going by land north to south, because right now they're building a road through the Darien. I'm the one that I personally discovered the two new bridges that are being built. And because I'm down there all the time, and I just looked at old maps, and I was like, if I were going to build a road through the Darien, I would. So I was just looking at the old maps, and I would go check. And finally, I found they were building two new bridges, and I drove straight up to Panama City, which took like more than a half a day. And I show up, and I'm got mud all over me, and I'm like, who's building a road to Colombia? And they're like, we're not building anything down there. I'm like, yeah, you are. And they're like, no, we're not. And I'm like, look. All this mud on me. I was just there this morning, right? And I think those people honestly didn't know, but it's clearly China that's building it through. China's already published a book on it, which is in Spanish and English. I have the book, right? So, I mean, they clearly are, but China's fingerprints are not all over it. Right now, as we speak, they're building the fourth bridge over the Panama Canal. China is. I get weekly updates on it.
So hold on a second. How can they build a road and bridges without the Panama officials knowing about it?
I mean, the Panama officials clearly knew about it on the upper level, but the level I was talking with, I think they honestly didn't know. I don't think they were lying. I think they just were naive about it.
Okay. Back to the question. Why are all these people coming from that place? Because look, I get if people from Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador wanted to go from Panama, but traveling from Africa and Asia costs a lot of money and is a massive logistical effort to transplant all these people and have them funneling up from here. Who's trafficking them? Who's shipping them over?
It's easy. It's not hard at all. It's just an organizational structure that you create, and it mostly is self-funding. Now, this is, again, how did we predict, my team, especially Masako and I, how did we predict that Darien Gap would become a major invasion route? It was easy. Routes and resources. It's the same way we predicted Nord Stream would be interrupted and destroyed. We predicted it publicly many, many times, and then boom, Nord Stream went. I mean, we were over there at BASF in Germany. So how do we predict all this? Because we understand how this body works, right? We understand the circulatory system here, right? That's why we're right beside the Chao Phraya River right here now in Thailand. You know what I mean? We're not on vacation. This is about routes and resources. If I were a general and I wanted to invade the United States with migrants, quote unquote, because we know they're at demographic warfare with us, how would I do it? One way I would do would be I would open up Darien Gap. So that's why we went there, and I started spending so much time there. And I would also use that to seize Panama Canal, because Panama is one of the most important places on planet Earth. And even a lot of so-called, our ancestors knew it extremely well. The Scottish tried to make a path between the seas in 1690s, right? How would I do it? I would seize those islands like Bahamas. Now, Antigua, the whole works. You see that for instance, the Chinese have a big port right off the coast of Florida. We went there a couple of years ago. It's literally right off the coast of Florida. Bahamas has a port. I'm sorry. China has a port in Bahamas. They have also in Antigua. They're taking all of these places out, and Chinese actually come from Bahamas. Let me repeat that. Chinese come from Bahamas up on the beaches of Florida, invading. They come across the northern border. We went up to Canada looking at this from one side to the other. We've done it from one side to the other on the southern border as well. They're actually coming across all the places that I would do if I were an enemy general, right? They're doing it quite well. And it's easy to do. You set up the superstructure, the organizational structure. The main body of that is called United Nations. I think a lot of people have heard of them. And the main subset of that that's doing it is called IOM, International Organization for Migration. Those guys, right? Amy Pope just met with the Pope last week. Amy Pope, her office is in New York. She is the leader of IOM. I think that was her second meeting with the Pope, at least second. But she put it on Twitter last week. Amy Pope, or X, Amy Pope was with the Pope again. So the Vatican Church is doing it. HIAS is doing it. Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society and the Vatican are thick on this.
Super insightful consultation, and Doc M came into it with an incredible amount of information and support. I really felt he was there to help, that he cared, and that he genuinely wants the best for you. Can't recommend him enough. Thanks again, Doc. From Dave. And folks, if you want to see 40 other reviews, 5-star reviews, just visit my website, docmalik.com, and you can look at in the menu consultations, or go directly to the booking page, docmalik.setmore.com. Book a consultation with me. If you're unsure about how to move forward with a diagnosis, with a treatment plan, or you feel like you're stuck in a rut, you don't trust your doctor, you've had surgeries and pills, and you've got side effects, whatever it might be, I can help you. I can act as your advocate. I can help you work the system to your benefit, knowing what questions to ask and to explore options that the mainstream doctors might not have covered with you. Folks, if this resonates with you, please book a consultation with me, and I can't wait to help you. Back to the show. Why are they doing it? So hold on a second. Hebrew Immigrant what?
HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society is there. They've got an office. You saw on that map that you first showed, San Vicente camp. That's a camp, right? I stayed in a 1-star hotel right beside that camp for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, probably 4 months, I think, right? I stayed there in the little 1-star hotel right next to, and guess what? Who eats breakfast there? HIAS, because their office is right behind it, like 40 or 50 meters. I almost leased their office, but they leased it before me. HIAS has an office right next to San Vicente camp. San Vicente camp is, I call it China camp, because that's what the camp that most of the Chinese use when they're getting on buses. If they survive the Darien Gap, they get on buses there at San Vicente camp, and they in HIAS has an office. There you go, HIAS right there. HIAS has an office about 40. The hotel I stayed in is about, say, 40 or 50 meters from the HIAS office, and their office is another 40 or 50 meters from the San Vicente camp. Now, who was a board member on HIAS? Alejandro Mayorkas. He was a child of Sephardic Jews, Cuban refugees, who came to America. So he was born in America, and he became a board member on HIAS. Alejandro Mayorkas, Alex Mayorkas. His name used to be Alex, but then he made it all fancy when he moved up, you know. And so Alex Mayorkas. So Alex Mayorkas was a board member on HIAS. Then he got promoted into being the director of Homeland Security. Now, I was down in the Darien Gap. I was there, and I was about to take some congressmen on the southern border, and one of the congressmen told me, he said, "Hey, we just got a note. Alex Mayorkas is about to come down to the Darien Gap, or get down to Panama." And I said, "Oh, Mayorkas is coming to Panama. I bet he's going to come by Blackhawk down to right there." So I waited for 4 days. Sure enough, I just sat there and read books for 4 days. And then 4 Blackhawks came in. Let's say 4 days I waited, and then 4 Blackhawks came in. I have it on video, right? And the Blackhawks are landing right in front of me. He gets out with his group, and they go into San Vicente, laying out the maps. I've got all this on my Substack. I put all the photos and videos, and they go in there, and he goes right beside. So the former board member on HIAS is now installed as the director of Homeland Security. He's in charge of invading the United States. Our Department of Homeland Security is in charge of invading the United States. Let me repeat. People often say, well, that makes no sense. That must be impossible. False. It makes perfect sense. If you're invading the United States, you would take generations to put people into these positions. That's what has happened. Like Trump is clearly all part of this larger architecture. So many people, Alejandro Mayorkas was installed, right? He got in. So many people are in their positions. You know, when I'm going across the entire southern border, the Border Patrol, U.S. Border Patrol, this far away from me, is loading people on the buses. And I'm like, how did these people get here? Most of the Border Patrol never heard of Darien Gap. These are Border Patrol. You know, been in Border Patrol 20 years or whatever, never heard of Darien Gap. The few that have heard of Darien Gap often tend to be very dialed in. The ones who know about it tend to know about it a lot, right? And some of them would be reading my work and think, oh, you're the guy, right? And so, but most of the Border Patrol, they're just little gears in a machine. My job is to be click, click, click. I'm a gear and a clock, and I don't even know what time it is, most of them. But the Border Patrol people that are loading up the buses, they're working for Department of Homeland Security, right? They're working for Alejandro Mayorkas, who was down there flooding them through. But when you ask the Border Patrol people what's causing this, they would be like, well, it's the Mexican cartels. I'm like, well, the Mexican cartels aren't loading them on the buses. You are, right? And they're like, yeah, but the Mexican cartels bring them to the border. I'm like, look, I'm with you. You're welcoming them across the border. You're not even asking them for passports. You're just asking what's your name and your birthday. That's all, you know. You're not even asking for ID in a lot of cases. Like the Chinese, I've got this on video. This isn't like theory, an ephemeral memory or something. I've got it straight up on high quality video and audio. And the Border Patrol would just be like, what's your name and birthday? Don't even ask for passports. So the Chinese could say, I'm Bruce Lee. I'm from,
okay. I'm just confused.
Guy.
I know, I'm confused. We've got from Chinese to now these guys like HIAS. Drawing on our Jewish values and history, HIAS stands for a world in which refugees find welcome, safety. What are they doing down in Panama? It's like an Arab charity in Panama. I'd be like, what the hell are they doing there? Like,
okay,
why?
October 7th happens, right? And I'm down in the Darien. I'm in one of those camps. I was very close to the one we're talking about now, but another camp that was on your map called Las Blancas. That was on your map as well. I was at that camp with Ann Vandersteel and Masako and a couple more, right? And October 7th happens. I'm like, they're going to genocide the people in Gaza. I published this right then because we know what they're doing. And a lot of those people are going to come right through the Darien Gap. They're clearing the way to clear Gaza and other places, right? This is part of a much bigger game. You have to think like a general, not like a corporal in the Border Patrol, right? When you look at this on the big map, how am I going to clear out Gaza? How am I going to do all these other things? How am I going to control that Suez Canal? How am I going to take the Panama Canal? How am I going to do all these things on the big board, right? On the big board. And sure enough, it wasn't very long after October 7th, which was a clear bullshit attack. That was a clear staged attack. I mean, obviously people died. It was clearly staged, but people started flowing from Gaza through the Darien Gap, right? And coming across through other mechanisms as well to other countries. But the bottom line is this is all part of a much larger architecture. The HIAS have been all about destroying Europe and the United States for generations. You can look on HIAS, get their original books, and you can get them online. They're old, they're expensive, but I've got them all. I mean, their game plan is quite clear. They're attacking white people, right? They're super clear about that. They're crystal clear. It's funny. One lady, she's in her 80s. She's up in Colorado. This would be a few months ago, and this would be in the news, so you could easily check it. She was actually attacked by a migrant, right? And she is a big HIAS support. She was one of those fake Holocaust survivors, right? I mean, when people looked into her background, like, I suffered in the Holocaust, or like they looked into her background, it's like, no, you didn't. You're another one of those fakes. She just didn't, right? She was a rich. Let me get to somewhere with this. So she was a big supporter of HIAS. She's wearing the HIAS tag. And then she gets burned by an actual alien who highest helped get into America. She actually wears the highest tag on this. You can find this lady. It's on my Substack. And so she's a big supporter. I support highest. And then one of the people that highest helped get into America burned her in a terrorist attack, right? You can't make up this stuff, right? It's actually, you would think it's self-destructive, and it is. It is self-destructive.
Okay.
But they do it anyway.
Slow down. Oh my God, my head is hurting now. Right? Let's just zoom out. You drink some water, get your breath back. So Suez Canal is 15% of global trade. Panama is 5% of global trade. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's shit ton. We're talking about thousands of ships, billions of dollars. It's very strategic choke points potentially. These are lifeblood arteries. And, you can see why they're strategically very, very important.
One more thing on that. One more thing that's important. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll keep it to a minimum, but on that, that's a very important splice point. Also, we need the Panama Canal so that we don't need to have two navies, right? Our Navy goes through the Panama Canal constantly, right?
Bingo.
So that's very important.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. Now, I get all that. And Gaza, you said it was staged. Just very quickly, short elevator pitch. What do you mean it was staged? I think it was staged. I think it was a false flag. These little paragliders went across. There was no response for 6-7 hours. And we're talking about a tiny country with the most secure electronic, border on the planet. They are watching cockroaches come up to the border, and never mind down weapons and down everything for 6-7 hours. That's bullshit. That was, to me, just a sign that this was fake. Why do you say it's staged?
Well, anyway, that's how they operate, and so it's how the United States operates too. Like, that was actually not a false flag. It was what's called a green flag attack. It was a green flag. It was what's called a staked goat attack and a green flag attack. So it was using two different strategies. Staked goat is when you use like a goat, you stake it down to catch a tiger or something, right? And staked goat is often used with using humans as well, right? And so green flag is when you know it's happening or you help cause it to happen. You don't actually do it. A false flag is like you wear their uniform.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
And so, or you use a false flag. But this is what's called a green flag. We know that actually Hamas is going to do it. But keep in mind, the United States and Israel have been supporting Hamas for generations, right? Over a long time. And so and Netanyahu, his actual name is Malikovsky. Malikovsky is very open. They used to support Hamas. They needed Hamas, and they needed that enemy, right? And so at the end of the day, the attack begins. And like you said, I've been to Israel. There's no way that they just did this flat-footed and, I mean, it was obviously on its face faked, right? I mean, it was real. People really died. I'm not saying that was fake. But keep in mind, I did a lot of combat. I did years of combat, and I was in special forces, not doing combat in special forces, but I did combat as a researcher and a war correspondent, right? So I've been on a lot of what's called QRFs, quick reaction forces, right? In actual combat, lots and lots. And those, often we were going by ground, sometimes by helicopter. And all the Black Hawk helicopter people watching this, you know how long it takes to get a cold Black Hawk off the ground. 4 minutes. If you got a good crew, 4 minutes. If you got a slow crew, 6-7 minutes, right? If you got a crew that should be fired, 10 minutes, right? They should all be fired. 10 minutes, you're fired, right? So those things go 180 knots, right? You should have been wheels up, let's say, in 5 minutes. You should have been in combat in, very shortly, let's say 20 minutes. You should have been slinging lead, right? And, I've said this before, and people go, you don't know what you're talking about. You got to make a plan. I'm like, brother, you need to shut up. This is how you do it. They're killing our people. We go there to the sound of gunfire, and we get in the middle of that shit, and we start killing people, right? And if we get our helicopter shot down, bring more. If we lose our A-team, bring more, right? If we lose 100 of our guys, bring more, right? They're killing our people. That's our plan. Go to the gunfire and engage. Get between the enemy and our people, right? And slow them down. Stop them if you can while reinforcements come. This is a simple plan. Everybody knows how to do it. This is like military. A 20-year-old corporal could figure this out. You don't need
101.
But
just 101.
It was 7 or 8 hours before the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, an entire McDonald's shift before they actually came into combat, right? And IDF openly killed some of their own people, right? They needed those hostages to get taken. They needed those as casus belli. That's called atrocity porn. There's actually a name for this, and it is called atrocity porn, right? You need those atrocities to create the hatred, right? You need to create hatred as the fuel to do what you're going to do, right? Hatred has two components, anger and disgust. You create that anger and disgust, rape, killing babies, burning people, chopping them to pieces. Now they're, hostages. We got to get our hostages. Israel doesn't want those hostages back, if there is even any hostages alive there. I've wondered if Israel even has the hostages in some dungeon that they think they're in Gaza. I don't know, because this is how the beast actually does operate. We're talking about the people who did the death jabs, right? That cost you your career, right? Your first career. Now you're on to one that's even more important, which is hard to imagine, but it is, right? This is the most dangerous thing we can do, is talk in these microphones, right? This is combat, right? This is an actual firefight through the air right here, right?
Bingo. You get it. You get it. You get it.
Oh,
Absolutely.
This is straight up. This is straight up. This is not entertainment. This is not fun. I know it can get me killed, and I know it can get you killed. We know 100%. That. We're engaging.
Dude, I was telling my friend who's still a doctor in the system, I was like, dude, I'm doing the most important job of my life right now. And I'm telling you right now, I'm in the army. I'm in the army of God, and I'm one of their freaking top officers. I'm in the trenches, and I'm fighting the front line. And dude, you are too. I'm so glad you recognize that.
We basically come in on the Blackhawks. You know what I mean? And this is it. There's no guarantee we're going to survive, right? In fact, the odds are pretty stacked against us, and we know that. But that's actually, if your people are being shot on October 7th, I'll guarantee you there's a lot of IDF. I spent a lot of time with Israelis. I'll guarantee you there's a lot of IDF and a lot of Israelis that would have showed up with a pitchfork to fight back, right? I'll guarantee you there's a lot of IDF that would have been riding in on bicycles to fight, right? And they probably were, right? They wouldn't have been waiting for orders. I wouldn't have been like, hey, I need some orders. I'd be like, orders? I got a gun. I hear gunfire. There's my orders, right? You know what I mean? I'm going to go engage because I'm going to try to slow them down and wait for my friends to show up, right? I mean, this is the way it goes. And that's what we're doing. We're doing a holding fight and, trying to get more people to join battle. I mean, like you see this lady right now in Japan, Takaichi, right? Or it's pronounced slightly differently in Japanese, but she could be the next prime minister very shortly. She's a jab pusher. And people are sending me all over the world. People are asking me what I think of her. And I'm like, let's skip past all the nice things she's saying about fighting back on China and throwing out Article 9 in the Constitution, all this stuff. I've written 3 books on Chinese information war, by the way, that are only in Japanese. They're not even English. So I've been fighting this fight for years in Japan, right? And what do I think about her? Let's skip past all the nonsense and we're going to get rid of the migrants or what. She's not actually saying that. But she's saying she's going to address it or whatever. But let's skip past all that. Let's get to how she behaved in the last time she was in combat. Last time she was in combat was jab, right? That was a firefight, right? And what did she do? She joined the enemy and she did the jab she put it on her ex. I published it yesterday on my Substack, right?
Dude, 100%. She is the UK's Nigel Farage. I've seen that Japanese lady. She's the UK's Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, just in case you don't know, I'm sure you do. In the height of COVID, he recommended Tony Blair to be the vaccine czar. He pushed the jab. When the last time we had a war, I don't give a shit about what he says about migrants and this and that and bringing back the country and all that kind of stuff. He's one of them. He is that Japanese lady dressed up, in a British suit and a pint of beer. He pushed the jab. He recommended the opposition, Tony Blair, that war criminal, to be the vaccine czar. They're all the same.
It's taken generations to get these people into these positions. Trump is too. And people say, who did you want? Biden? Obviously not, because he's one of them too, right? Same way with the Texas governor. One of my good friends is running for governor down there in Texas now. Doc Pete Chambers, a retired Green Beret doctor, because Abbott is the governor, Texas governor. I was warning against, I spend a lot of time in Texas. I was just there a few months ago, right? And I'll be back in Texas sometime in the next probably few months. But the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, he has clear World Economic Forum. And when I would warn against him, so hard warning against him, people would say, well, who do you want? Beto? Beto's obviously, he's like Biden. I mean, he's something you step in and have to clean your shoe, right? But Abbott, that's why they do this kayfabe, right? They do this, they put this really incredibly nutty guy up, and then they put the guy that they want in, Abbott. And they put Biden up because they want Trump.
This is they heard us. They heard us. So this is what they're doing right now with Keir Starmer. They're making him so unpopular that everybody's going to push and elect Nigel Farage as the next prime minister. This is what they want.
And they'll push the jab.
And the guy who pushed the jab. But listen, let's go back to Gaza. So basically, circle back a bit because we're just skipping too fast. So it wasn't a false flag. It was a green flag. When you say staked goat, was that music festival that they pushed right close to the border, or what was the staked goat element in that whole October 7th thing?
Exactly, it was that music fest, and they put it. And you've heard all the controversy about that. Why was it even there? Why did they move it at the last minute? And by the way, staked goat attack. That's an old form of warfare again, or even hunting down in the Darien Gap. I was in this, village out there in the jungle, and I always go to the hunters in all these villages, and I'll find the people with the skulls on their huts and stuff. There was a new jaguar skull in this hut, and I asked who's there, and it was an Imbara Indian, and I asked how he got it, and it was clearly a very close shot. It was a very close shotgun shot, the pattern was like this big, it's like it was almost point blank.
Wow.
Like, whoa, who shot that thing that close? And he showed me a shotgun. It's a 20 gauge, and it's got a zip tie. It's a one shot, and then you have to unscrew the zip tie and load the second shot. It's worse than a musket, man. And so anyway, I said, how did you get that? He staked a pig next to the river on a moonless night. They like to hunt on a moonless night. And he waited. He just waited with his headlight. It was off, of course. And he in an advantageous position, from the wind flow and the scent stream, and it came up and it got the pig, and he said, I turned on my light, and the jaguar's looking at me. It would not release the pig, and so it was a staked pig attack, and he popped it, and it killed it, right? And it's normal. It's in hunting or whatever, right? It's baiting the trap. That's all. It's bait. Okay. Goat is bait.
Okay, so we've talked about Gaza, October 7th being completely green flag, staked goat. Let's go back to this. I'm still this Hebrew Hayas thing. What are they doing down in the Darien Gap helping bring migrants over? I know about the Soros Foundation and open borders, but these people, the Zionists or these Jewish people, the Alexandria people, the Hebrew people, I mean, they run America. They own America. They've got America. Why do they need to invade it? I just don't understand any of this. Why are they opening up the doors to Europe? I mean, I feel like all these wars in West Asia, Middle East, are created by the Zionist entity and the UK and the US, and they destabilize these countries. They bomb them. They replace secular, democratically elected governments, impose jihadi nut jobs, fund the jihadi nut jobs, use them as a mobile army, mercenary force, whether it's in Bosnia or Afghanistan or whatever, the Taliban, Al Qaeda, the database. And then they once they've disrupted those countries, extracted their wealth, then they open the doors to Europe and say, yeah, come over, head choppers, and now invade Europe. What the fuck is going on here?
It's the old people are trying to control the world. There's various oligarchical systems. Now, keep in mind, like Soros. Soros is just a fruit from a larger poison tree. In other words, if Soros was never born, or if he's gone tomorrow, he'll be gone soon because he's getting older. It doesn't matter. He's just a fruit off of a larger architecture, right? And this was formed a long time ago. And there's different oligarchical structures that are doing different things. You got the Chinese, of course, you got the Russian structures, and those are part of larger structures, right? Like you've got some of those are from religious structures, like let's say Catholicism, which will have different, like the Jesuits versus the all these different people, right? And then you've got the Muslim structures. Let's say their larger architecture might be Islam, but then they've got substructures that are based on tribe and all sorts of things, right? So it's all these different rivers of architectures that come together, and they form different oligarchical galaxies, right? You might say. But these oligarchical structures, these organizational structures, they transcend any individual. Like, for instance, if everybody in the U.S. Army were suddenly to retire today and leave, and then you just refill it again, you still have that same organizational structure. Now, it would change its personality, but a lot of it would be very similar, right? Because the organizational structure would be like where the riverbed flows, right? And so what I'm getting to is Soros, again, he's just a ephemeral He's a leaf on a tree, just like Trump is, right? Once they're gone, whether it was Abbott in Texas as the governor or whomever, Starmer, all these different people, Trudeau up in Canada, they are installations, but they're just leaves on the poison tree. If we don't go after the tree itself, you're just going after the leaves. Oh, I picked another leaf off. Oh, that leaf fell off. Oh, yeah, we're happy now. No, you're not. There's another leaf replacing it. I mean, you have to go after the organizational structure. And short of that, it's a forever war. What's going on? Humans always fight over routes and resources, right? Routes and resources. Almost every war you've ever heard of is about routes and resources. Now, it may look like it's about something else. It may look like it's about, hostages in Gaza or something. That's not what it's about. Like the fight over here in Thailand recently, and it's still ongoing. They're still having constant actions between Cambodia and Thailand about, in the news, it's all about the Pravert Temple, right? And that 1907 French map and blah, blah, blah. That's not what it's about. But in the news, all over the news, it's all about, it's that temple, it's a border dispute. No, it's not. It's about routes and resources. Thailand is the hyphen in Indo-Pacific security. I mean, the energy in the Gulf of Thailand. And it's about making a route through the Kra Isthmus over between the Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea. It's about making a canal from the Mekong River called the Funan Techo Canal through Cambodia into the Gulf of Thailand, right? It's about making railways down from China through Laos and Cambodia and going through Thailand and going to the Kra Isthmus and other things. It's about routes and resources. This country is rich, and I keep warning Thais, high-level Thais and other people that are doing things at lower, different levels, that you got to be careful of going into war with Cambodia, because I know on the face of it, it's about one thing, it's about that temple, but what's really happening is there are big players that want to rip Thailand into pieces, right? They want to rip it into pieces. They want to rip that southern part off, those 3 southern provinces down there near Malaysia, you're looking at Cambodia now, and they want to rip. You see the skinny trunk part there? That's called the Kra Isthmus. That's it right there. See, that's the Kra Isthmus. The first time I went down to look at that potential canal was in 2014. I went down there again last year looking at it. But that is, for centuries, people have wanted to make a canal across there. It's harder than the Panama Canal. But they're working on a railway and road system across now, right? And so that will allow China to bypass the Strait of Malacca. If you go a little bit further south down there by Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, there it is. That's the Strait of Malacca. Strait of Malacca right there. That is one of the most important choke points on planet Earth. It's up there with Suez and Panama Canal. For Asia, that is absolutely vital. China wants to bypass that. That's why they're building trains everywhere. You see where your mouse is? Perfect. They can bypass that, and then they won't get choked off as easily at Strait of Malacca. And also, if they build a canal through Cambodia from the Mekong River, then Vietnam doesn't control that mouth either. It allows for China to have a lot more flexibility. They've already built a train all the way across over to from Shanghai and other feeders all the way to Iran, deep into Iran, right? And that train also, I've been to the Chinese side at Shanghai and whatnot. It also goes all the way over to Rotterdam and Netherlands. Rotterdam is the biggest harbor in Netherlands. I've been there quite a lot. We spend a lot of time in Netherlands because that's another key node. And the trains go all through Europe. They go down to Spain and whatnot. So China is busy building those railways. Keep in mind, the most cost-effective way to transport a great deal of cargo is by water, right? By far is by water. Next is by rail, right? And so China is building China is basically, weirdly, it looks like China has a lot of sea coast, which they do, but essentially they're mostly actually weirdly landlocked, right? When you look at China, it's actually mostly weirdly landlocked, even though it doesn't look like it. You've got Japan in the way, you've got, the Okinawa, Ryukyu and all that. You've got Formosa, Taiwan, all these different things in the way, the island chains, not to go into all that. But this is about routes and resources. And so the war that you see over in Israel, or the things that you see in Panama, and if you want to actually get control of these routes and resources, one thing that would be very helpful is to erode the nation state, right? That's why I keep warning Thais. I know Thais are very resilient, but they've got these dope stores all over the place now. I picked up this little doll in a dope store last week. And this one, they got marijuana stores all over the place here now. These two. And it says what? It says, take me home, I'm for sale, right? Like most of the bloggers, take me home, I'm for sale. Puppets, right? They're installing these puppets. I got that in the dope store. And here's Baby Doper right here, right? Baby Doper. Literally, it's a dope pipe, right?
Wow.
Smoking dope right out of his little baby head, right?
Wow. Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda.
Yeah, little baby Yoda doper. And there's dope stores all around me, right? They didn't have those 3 years ago. So they're using these to erode these nation states. You see, when you and I talked on the phone, you talked about how all the dope that was around when you were growing up. That's because Scotland is under direct attack. It's chemical warfare on it. One of the ways we beat
alcohol and heroin.
Alcohol is over the top. One of the ways we beat the Indians, because the Indians were great fighters. And in Americas, right? They're fantastic fighters. One of the ways we beat them, firewater, giving them whiskey. Spirits, spirits. That's why they call it spirits. Literally, one of the most corrosive things ever is spirits, is alcohol. And we just fed the Indians so much alcohol. It wasn't smallpox blankets. In fact, that's probably a nonsense story. There's no factual basis for the smallpox thing, although everybody knows it's true. But what we did was firewater. And we did all kinds of financial mechanisms that are very similar to what we did actually in actually Israel, believe it or not. Not to go into that, it's a whole different. But at the end of the day, the things that you see happening all over the world now are just the latest bloom in and trying to rule the world. Routes and resources, British Empire, Scotland, Darien Gap.
I'm going to go back to Thailand in a second, but basically in Gaza, they're talking about this Ben Gurion Canal that goes right through basically Gaza. And then you've got this a massive Leviathan oil and gas field sitting off the Mediterranean Sea, off Gaza Strip.
That's right.
And if it's off Gaza, then it's technically their resource. But if you get everyone to empty out of Gaza and Israel takes it over, well, it's Israel's then. And they can divvy it up between Egypt and Israel, and they can also create their own canal. I think that's a big part of what's going on in Gaza. Am I right?
100%. And remember, the reason that Israel was even created was because of the Suez Canal opened in 1869. And again, at that time, the British Empire was the biggest empire in the world. In 1707, when they absorbed Scotland after Scotland failed in Darien, then that's it was just growing and growing and growing. The next thing you know, the British Empire's.
Technically, it wasn't the British Empire. Technically, it was a massive monopolistic oligarchic company. It was the East India Company, which is like Amazon on steroids. Imagine Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, BlackRock, the whole shebang put together. That was the East India Company. It had more revenue and income than countries. It had a larger standing army than countries. It was a Leviathan basically ruling the world. And then because of financial irregularities and problems and disasters and droughts and famines and problems back home, the people didn't like the East India Company. There were a lot of people saying, what is going on here? It's subsumed by the government and the royal family, but it never really went away, did it?
No. All these huge, and you're exactly right. Because it was again, this river right out my window, the Chopra River, they were coming up this river, East India Company, and the Dutch East India Company too, right? And the Japanese were as well. And so this is the main river of Thailand.
So let's go to Thailand then. So what's happening in Thailand? So, let's go back to this map, because I didn't appreciate Burma was so long and thin, came all the way down here. So is Thailand friends with China? I mean, does China just want to cross over here and build this thing, or is it going to be from Malaysia? What's going on here? Where's this?
To the Thai part. See where the Myanmar border ends down there on the bottom part?
Yeah, down there.
Okay, just south of that is where they want to build now they're not actually working on a canal right now, but south of that is where they want to build they're working on actually road and road system right now. We went down and looked at it last year, but so it's in the news all the time here, all the time. Now, Thailand is a great thing about Thailand is they're very independently minded, right? And so that's why they're under attack with the drugs and these other things to try to erode their inner strength. Because the Thai people, I spent a lot of time here. I spent more than 20 years actually in Asia. And a lot of that time was in Thailand and China and that sort of thing, India. And I've been all over this place. In those 20 years, I've been in 25 Asian countries. Thailand is amazingly, I call them bamboo people because they're so strong. They're stronger than steel pound for pound. And no matter what happens to Thailand, they just stand right back up like bamboo. So the Chinese have been trying debt traps with Thailand. Thailand is one of the richest countries in the world. People don't get this. They're richer here than they are in Netherlands. Thailand as a country. Yep. Not as people, individuals, but as a country. This country is amazingly rich. It's almost up there with Switzerland, right?
What does it have?
Amazingly rich country.
What does it have? What makes it so
huge,
rich?
Like Masako, my wife and I had tea a few weeks ago with the former prime minister here. He's a friend of mine. In fact, I wrote the last 2 pages of his book. In fact, I titled this book, The Simple Truth, right? And so anyway, so we're having tea and we're talking about these sorts of things. And I was asking him about the gold reserves and the, cash reserves and whatnot. Thailand is basically swimming in gold and cash. They are very wise with their monetary system. They're very wise with their, we could go on for hours about this, but I'll skip past all that. But the bottom line is Thailand has many forms of resilience. And they're just like built in so many layers of resilience. And one of those, for instance, next door in Laos, Laos is less resilient. They're not as, let's say, sophisticated. Thais are weirdly sophisticated people. I mean, the upper levels, they just, like one senior guy told me about, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. I said, like, how are you negotiating between China and Japan and the United States? He's like, basically, we're like an elephant, balancing on a basketball, balancing on a soccer ball. You know what I mean? It's like because I've watched Thailand, studying Thai history. It's like in World War II, Thailand was technically an Axis power. This country was filled with like 200,000 Japanese troops. Yeah, and Great Britain was actually bombing bridges. Like I think it bombed this bridge right outside my window actually, and they were bombing bridges here in Bangkok, right? And but the United States didn't. United States and when the Thais said they're going to declare war on us, we're like, no, why don't we just basically go have tea? We're not going to go to war with you. So I mean, Thailand somehow they're very sophisticated in their ability to do things and negotiate their way through stuff. And that's part of their resilience. But next door, over in Laos, they're a lot simpler. They're a lot less resilient in their minds and what sort. So what now? Like China has built a train through Laos, and they did the normal debt trap. Hey, we'll build you a train, and it'll build your economy. And they had, what did they have? I've forgotten. Maybe 500 meters on each side of the train. I'd have to look it up. So I may be wrong on the actual numbers. And then Laos is unable to service the debt, and so now China's like, okay, we're going to take a much bigger swathe of land on each side of the railway, right? This is normal. So they'll end up controlling Laos. They're building hydropower. You go down to Ecuador, where many of the Chinese are invading through the Darien Gap. They'll land in Ecuador in South America. China has been installing a lot of their hydro and electrical transformers and all this. And a couple of years ago, when Ecuador said, hey, we're getting sick of Chinese because they're causing us so many problems, and they made a visa mandatory, you can find this in the news. Like in about 24 hours, the electricity went off across Ecuador, right? I mean, so that was just like a couple of years ago. And what I'm getting to is all these other countries around Thailand, like Cambodia, they're basically a vassal state of China. They even name the new canal, if they end up building it, from the Mekong through Cambodia, the Funan Techo Canal, which is based on old, what they would call, anyway, not to go into that, but it's China, and next door in Myanmar, huge civil war going on because, they've done the normal divide and conquer. The Irrawaddy River is basically the Mississippi River of Burma. I've been over there looking at that quite a few times. And this outside my window, the Chao Phraya River, is basically the Mississippi of Thailand.
How'd you spell the Chao Phraya River?
CHAO is one word, and then PHRAYA. It's basically, it runs right through Bangkok, and if you look, you can go up this river and go all the way up the Ping River and go to like Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, leave Thailand. You can go all over Thailand from this river, right? So the former capital of Thailand was actually Ayutthaya, and it's right on this river. We just got a private boat recently and went up there a week or two ago from here, and just to look at the route. A huge amount of the world rice goes right by my window right here, right by my window, and fertilizer goes up into Thailand, up this river, and rice goes down this river. This is a main artery of Thailand. You see it going right through through Bangkok,
Massive.
right by my window. And
it's like in Pakistan, the Indus River or the Ganges
that's
in
right.
India. It's big
exactly
rivers.
like that.
Yeah.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
These rivers, man. And you look over in Myanmar next door, and it's the Irrawaddy, right?
Okay.
And so there's big, fights over that and divide and conquer stuff going on. And, the United States is so blessed because we got this Mississippi River system that is actually unbelievable. And, you could actually take a kayak from the north part of Thailand, Chiang Rai, actually across the border. You could take a kayak and go all the way down this river out here and go up into Switzerland and never leave the water, right? You could take a kayak from right here and go deep, deep into the Amazon. More than halfway through South America, you could go up into the Andes until you had to carry the kayak. This is how connected these rivers are, right? The people that were running around on all the boats in the old days, they still do it. These rivers are absolutely rivers of gold, right? So you can go all over the world on these rivers and on the seas, right? And so that's why Ayutthaya used to be the capital. It's on the same river. It's just upstream a few hours by boat.
Okay, let's circle back a bit. Back to Darien Gap. I'm confused. So you got the Chinese invading. Like, say, for example, if you have 100 people crossing the Darien Gap, how would you break them down nationality-wise? That 100,
That's a complex question because it's changed over time. Like about 4 years ago, it would be like, 2 Chinese came through last week. And I've got a lot of the records. We've got over 1 million records.
I know. I'm just saying, like, let's get 100. So that's like 100%. I have 100%, break it down, like nationalities, which countries are coming over?
Okay, that's why I'm saying it gets complex. Because if you look at it 4 years ago, it was mostly Haitians and Cubans. About 4 years ago. It was mostly, and then those started bypassing, like the Cubans started bypassing Darien and they go through Nicaragua. Like they don't even go through Darien. Most of the Cubans don't even go. So it changes over time. So if you were to divide it among the entire time, it's actually a complex question because over time, just in the last 4 or 5 years, the whole flow itself, it used to be 200 a day was a lot of people. Then you could get 8,000 in a day, right? That's why when I first started going down there, 200 in a day was a huge number. And that's where I started publishing. I'm like, I think this is going to end up being a major route. And people are like, why are you in the jungle so much? I'm like, listen, look at my work and look how accurate it always turns out to be. Why? Because I'm here on the ground, right? You know what I mean? And I'm watching this. This is all I study.
I know.
And so
but just give me a rough figure now.
What I'm getting to is over time, that ant route it went from little ants to 1 or 2 Chinese in a week to 200 in a day was nothing. And how many Chinese do we have in the records? I think at least 40,000 Chinese are in the records, but they only really started heavy like 2.5 years ago or so, right?
So let's take 2025. Like what percentage?
Right now, it's very, very low because they've mostly choked it down. The plumbing is still there. There's very few, but what I'm getting to is Darien Gap is only one of the flows. It's a major flow, and it's a very important flow because of various reasons. But a lot of them are coming in on student visas. Others are coming through the Canadian border, right? So the Canadian border is like, it's even bigger than our southern border. And we've been up there looking at it. It's like nothing. It's completely open. Chinese come and go back and forth between Canada and the United States. The Chinese are clearly moving to take the west coast of the United States, right? And moving to take Canada. They're going to end up fighting the Indians up in Canada, right? And I could, again, that's a whole separate subject. But the Chinese also come through Bahamas. They come through on student visas. They come through on work visas. They come through on boats in various ways. And like 30 years ago or so, they were coming on boats into New York, right? I mean, they were actually coming that route.
Okay.
Now it's it's not just one way. It's a whole rainstorm, right?
I get that. So if let's look at illegal migrants coming into the US as a total. How many are coming? Illegal migrants, say average over the last couple of years, and where are they predominantly from? It sounds like, are they mainly Chinese now?
Nobody knows. They're not mainly Chinese, but it would be some huge number. Nobody knows. I don't even know if Chinese know the actual numbers, right? Because a lot of them are coming through from other places. It's like Chinese that were off on vacation in Indonesia or something, or Thailand. A lot of them will come here first. A lot of them will actually go to Chiang Mai or here in Bangkok, and they start with a vacation here, and then they go through Turkey and they go to Ecuador and come through, or they go to Canada, so there's all these different flows. I don't think anybody actually knows how many Chinese. I don't think the MSS, which is the Ministry of State Security, that's the Chinese CIA. I don't think they even know.
So is this all organic, or is the government sending it? Like, people keep saying young army men are coming over. I mean, if they're on vacation, are we talking about families and children and wives and women, or
many?
Like, give me an idea. What's the demographics like? When I hear Darien Gap, mass migration, illegal migration, I hear so many different things. I just want to know, like, what is happening? Who's coming over and from where?
Through the Darien Gap, 140 or 150 countries. Into the United States, more, right? Because some people come through different flows, right? Like, I don't see Russians coming through the Darien Gap, right? They'll come through Canada or just directly in the United, or they go through Mexico, right? So a lot of people bypass that feeder, right? And so Chinese, a lot come through with families. I have many, many videos. I'm out there talking with them all the time, and there'll be little kids, and then there's others, like one, we call him Chai Ninja. His name was Lushan Zhao, actually. And this guy was very interesting. And I've got him on video. I was down there with Anthony Rubin and my wife Masako and a few others, and we wait at night as they come out of the jungle, because that's when people will talk more, actually, is at nighttime. And so there he is. He got very aggressive. We got like an hour and 29 minutes of video / audio, mostly audio, with him. And this guy, he said that he told us he came through Bahamas and he had bought a boat, ran out of gas, and he was drifting, and the U.S. Coast Guard picked him up, right? Now, keep in mind, he was coming through the Bahamas to Florida, ran out of gas, he said. U.S. Coast Guard picked him up, sent him back to Bahamas, who deported him. They were going to send him back to China, but he had a connecting flight in Cuba. And in Cuba, he got a new flight to Ecuador. And then in Ecuador, he came through Colombia and came through the Darien Gap, and we intercepted him. Now, I got a lot of information from the guy, right? Like his phone number. And we were able to track back. I was able to confirm U.S. Coast Guard definitely picked him up. They 100%. So that's valid. And then, and then we met him. We physically, and got photos of him and that sort of thing. We tracked him back to China and found out a lot about him. I think he's probably MSS, which is Ministry of State Security. His English was very good. His body language was very good. He knew a lot of, they have an actual school in Luoyang. They have I went to the U.S. military language school. I went to one in California, but ours was less intense than some of theirs are. Like this guy was an obvious spy, right? I mean, it was like nakedly obvious, right? But he leaked. I mean, he was tired. He was itching. These modern guy had been eating him up and all this stuff. And sometimes they'll talk, and he was talking. And he had good American body language. He was like, yeah, man. Oh, yeah. He was like, American in my heart and all this stuff. I see guys coming through that I have photos of bathing in the river, Chinese with new tattoos. Like one guy has a Georgia Bulldog tattoo on his chest. He's a Chinese guy. We're deep in the jungle. He's in Las Blancas village. There he is. I'm like, brand new tattoo. You know how it looks. And it's Georgia Bulldogs. So I'm like, oh, that guy's probably going to Georgia. So he's already got the tattoos in advance, right? And these guys, so some of them are clear operators. Some are, I think actually just people looking for another life. But a lot of the Chinese come through and they start dope farms. So they had dope farms all over the United States now. They in Oklahoma and Oregon and Maine and
Do you know what
Texas.
it is? Do you know what it is, Michael? Sorry for interrupting. It's the reverse of the Opium Wars. It's the complete reverse.
A lot of people say that, but the Chinese, speaking of opium wars, you know what these are? I picked these up in an antique shop yesterday. These are old opium weights. These are old opium weights, and these are from Burma. These are like, yeah, these are old. Yeah, I study this quite a lot. That's why I just happened to pick this up yesterday in an antique. But the opium wars. A lot of people will automatically go, "Oh, the Chinese are just getting even," right?
Yeah.
But the Chinese, that's bullshit. I mean, the Chinese have been using opium as a war weapon centuries before that, and still use it. And they use fentanyl. Like I was over, Masako and I were talking with a very interesting guy in Taiwan recently, not Thailand, but Taiwan. And I was asking him about the drugs. And he said, yeah, we're starting to get a lot of fentanyl into Taiwan from China, right? The Chinese have used opium and other intoxicants as weapons of war. And then and a lot of the people that were using the opium against, it was the British for sure. And some of it was going right down this river. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, the Chinese were also doing it to themselves. There was an opium war. There's no question about it. But remember, professional victims are always predators. I've never seen an exception to that. Chinese and like Zionists, it's built into the DNA of the firmware is that professional victim. I'm not saying DNA, but the firmware itself is a professional victim. Chinese, like, who's not a professional victim? Thais. And that's one reason I think they're so resilient. Even their language in Thailand, they don't say, you hurt me. They'll say, I hurt. They don't blame themselves, but they take responsibility for their feelings. If you make me upset or angry, it's not, see how I just did it in English? You made me angry. See, that's a weakness. I'm giving my power to you by saying you made me angry. I mean, like if I'm a warrior but the Thais, that's not even in their language. It's not even in their language. They can't. They don't have a way of saying you made me angry.
Michael, I love all this, and you're 100% right. Listen, the Opium Wars were really bad and very wrong, and it was a way of the French, American, and British opening up China for trade. I accept that, but during the Communist Revolution, the Communist Party sold opium to the nationalist areas, and so 100%. They were drugging and making their own people addicted. So I 100% agree with you that, it's not that black and white. But clearly, China now is using that same formula of infiltrating, drugging up, making, one of the things that I say, Michael, is that I'm this 5'7" guy, right? But I'm a man. I'm 50, right? I'm trimmed, slim. I train, I exercise. Where are the men today? Most guys my age have got beach ball bellies. They're out drinking beer, smoking on their vapes, their cherry vapes, their hash, their cannabis. They're drinking their energy drinks. They're not men. They're soy men. Men. And I just think a lot of the people in the other parts of the world still have testosterone and are still men. And I'm worried about the men here in the West. We've gone soft, putty soft, and it needs to be fixed.
That's what they are attacking Thailand now. That's all these dope stores, right? And I'm warning them. I'm like, Thais they still love Muay Thai. They still love to do man stuff. But Thai women have complained, and Japanese women have told me for years, the men are getting weaker. And it makes women unhappy. Now, in the movies, the women like to have a boy girlfriend, their gay friend or whatever, right? But in reality, biologically, women want a man that will fight a bear, right? They want a man that can throw some lead down or swing a sword, right? They want a man that will stand up and fight, right? Now we're fighting with these things. There's a high chance it'll get us killed. I found this in a store not far from here just the other day. 1971, Walter Cronkite, right? A lot of Americans say, I remember when the media was, look at this. How the U.S. Army spies on citizens, 1971.
Wow.
1971, right? Look at that. And so a lot of Americans will say, I remember when the media was honest. It's like, no, you don't. You remember when you thought it was honest. you have no memory of when the media was honest, because it never was. It was always corporately owned, right? It was from day one. But then there are little newspapers that'll break out here and there, or they'll have differing views because it was more fragmented. So you could get differing views, or like us right now. We're still, at the moment, we are exercising the freedoms that are still here until they cut this off. Eventually this will get cut off, as you know, right? In one way or the other, right? The bloody microphone, as Charlie Kirk, right? And but at the end of the day, the men are getting weaker, and that's part of the program. How did we destroy the Indian? Those Indian men were very strong. You read you should see my library. I mean, I've studied so much on the old Indians. Those dudes were very strong. But how did we smoke them? Firewater, giving them whiskey. I mean, that was it. That was the number one weapon against them.
I've seen it. Like in the old days, they were chiseled, 6-packs, muscular, riding horses, bareback. I've been down to the States a lot. I've been near the reservations. And you know what? They're all overweight. They got diabetes. They're on mobility scooters, and they're alcoholics. I mean, they got fucked up royally. But anyway, circle back to Darien Gap, right? So I'm really confused. I get Chinese people coming over, migrants coming over, open borders, foundations, NGOs, blah, blah, blah. I still am shocked about this high-ass thing. Why are the Zionists trying to destroy America by getting all these migrant invasion? Or is this genuinely a charitable organization that's trying to do some good?
It's a war formation. But again, the people that are involved, like Doctors Without Morals, a lot of the Doctors Without Morals people I see are actually really doctors with high morals that are inside of that structure. But the structure itself is a war formation, right? And highest. Now, keep in mind, let's talk about Zionists for a minute. Zionism, as we know it, is a new formation. As you know, Theodore Herzl, 1890s, and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that is actually a product of trying to get control of the Suez Canal, right? And so, so in other words, all these things were already going on and very well developed and very mature long before the Suez Canal opened in 1869, long before Theodore Herzl was even born, right? Before the Zionism that we know was ever born, these things were highly mature, moving around populations, or all this work from the Fabians. So much of their literature I have actually is fascinating, but it goes long before the Fabians too, right? So when we look at these organizational structures, this is old, and I haven't been able to find where it starts. I mean, you and I talked about it on the phone. Romans were doing it. The Romans were mature about it. By the time the Romans were doing it, the Romans weren't just like piddling in it. They were good at it. They were artists at it, right? You know, plowing up one population and putting in another, right? So everywhere I go around the world, it's either, I mean, like for instance, in Iraq, I spent 2 years in Iraq, and Saddam would move different populations around to break them up, or the electricity from one place was made in another place, so he could cut them off in between. You know, it's all divide and conquer, right? Divide and rule. And so it's an old, you know, these basically chopping down the trees and replanting, sunflowers is an old game, but it's done with demographics, right? Like the Scottish. I mean, you're Scottish. My culture is Scots-Irish. Scottish were used by the English to fight the Irish, and then they blended and became the crazy Scots-Irish, which is my culture, and which were then used to fight Cherokee and other Indians, right? So we were actually, I am actually a product of that demographic replanting, right? And so in all of America, the current United States is actually, of all the battlegrounds that were on Earth, like India and so many others, the globalists really met for the big Thunderdome. That was in North America, and it became the United States, right? So France was fighting, Great Britain was fighting Spain, and Spain used to be, I'm from Florida, Florida is named, it's a Spanish name, land of flowers, right? Florida, right? So, it's like, it used to be a Spanish colony, and the British had it, and then we took it, right? And so, then America took it, right? And so this was the place where everybody came to fight. The big boys fought, and the winners, they were like the distillate, right? They were 24 karat gold, hardcore fighting men, right? Like there's actually a book about the Scots-Irish called Born Fighting. And the Scots-Irish ended up being like the spinal cord. Let's say if the Suez is the spinal cord of the British Empire on trade, the spinal cord of American, let's say the core of American beliefs and strength was Scot-Irish, clearly. like obviously, right? And like so many names and places like Texas are named after Scots-Irish, or so many of the original astronauts were Scots-Irish and presidents and that sort of thing. Now they've been, basically mitigated. A lot of them, obviously are not what they used to be. Some are. A lot of our special operations forces, Scots-Irish, right? Hardcore. I mean, like it's changed over time, but when I was in special forces, they were mostly Scots-Irish people, right? And so that's because that's our firmware. We like strong women. We like I have no use for a weak woman, right? Since I was a child, I never liked weak girls. Since I was a little boy, I was just like, I want a girl that can get stung by a bee and not running around crying all the time. You know what I mean? I don't know why we're just taught to value strong women. And as I grew older, I was like, I had no interest in a woman that can't shoot a gun. You know what I mean? I mean, you got to be able to throw some lead right beside me. That's Scot-Irish. That's the Scot-Irish. Another thing that Scots-Irish do a lot is intermarry with foreign cultures. Like a lot of the Scots-Irish married with Cherokee and that sort of thing, right? So I mean, it's kind of interesting. Or they come over in World War II and marry Japanese women. It's kind of interesting how it all works out in the end. But what I'm getting to is that was an actual transplant used by the English, Scots-Irish. First, it was Scottish to fight Irish in Ulster Scots, whatnot, and then those same people over a long period of time became their own thing, Scots-Irish, and they were brought over to fight Indians. And they were always on the borderlands. And so that's why you see in Manifest Destiny, in the old cowboy movies, that was mostly like Scots-Irish going at each other, right? And Scots-Irish are intense people. They, a lot of them are some of the best scientists in the world, actually, are Scottish, as you know. Some of the most, the Scotland is, for the tiny little country that it is, it like radiates intelligence, right? And toughness. I mean, actually crazy enough to think they could make a path between the seas and the Darien, and they would have done it if it weren't for all three strikes, right? And then the Scots-Irish fused that, and they're very adventurous types, right? And but at the end of the day, we ended up being, my actual culture and the spinal cord of the American, core of America was Scots-Irish. But now it's obviously in minority, and it's a lot of the Scots-Irish in a lot of places are, they've become weak. They're out eating chicken wings at Hooters right now.
Okay. So look, before we go back to what's happening in America, I just want to talk about basically Scots-Irish, just in case people don't realize. So Scotland's been called lots of different names: Alba, Caledonia, but it was a Gaelic-speaking place, and it's
where did they get the name Alba?
White. It means
the Latin name.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm pouring water here.
I think it is. But it was full of
like albedo.
Yeah,
reflection.
It was Gaelic, Pictish people, Celtic, that kind of background. But anyway, the Scots, I think they were called from Scotty, and Scotty is Gaelic people from Ireland, and they came over around the 11th or 12th century. So people from Ireland migrated to the west of Scotland, and they were the Scotty people from Ireland, who then eventually took over most of Caledonia, and it became Scotland, although originally they're from Ireland. And then interestingly, around 1600, so we're talking about like 400 or 500 years later, when the English have defeated the Gaelic people in Northern Ireland, they wanted to replant plantation Ulster. So a lot of Scottish people went back to Northern Ireland along with some English people. So it's this movement of people I just think is hilarious. And then those people from Ulster, a large tranche of them went to the Appalachian Mountains or America.
That's right.
And, and all that kind of stuff that you're talking about. It's actually fascinating. Anyway, look, the Zionists, as far as I'm concerned, run the UK and America. Like, why would they want mass migration into America? Why would they want a controlled demolition of the West? They're in charge. They have the biggest empire in the world right now, the biggest superpower. Why is it in their interest to destroy it? I don't understand that. Why are they working with the Chinese? If that's the case.
A question that people ask themselves every day. Because ultimately the Chinese because they would have more power if they did not attack us. Ultimately, they would have a lot more power, right? But pushing the death jabs and that sort of thing. Keep in mind, the modern Zionist that we know is a formation from actually mostly the British Empire and then the United States, right?
100%.
That's the Zionists as we know them, right? And what often happens with puppets is the puppet gets a life of its own, right? So the Zionists that were just like the Scots-Irish, who were used by the English to come over and fight Cherokee and whatnot. And before you know it, the Scots-Irish, the puppet gets a lot of life of its own. And we're like, hey, we're going to make our own. It wasn't only Scots-Irish, but among the people that made the 13 and split off from, Great Britain was like the puppet, the puppet that used to fight the Cherokee and all the other Indians ended up saying, hey, no, we're going to throw your tea overboard, right? That sort of thing, right? So the puppet often gets a life. This is just a normal life cycle of these things, right? Let me tell you a quick story. When I was in Special Forces, we learned the 7 phases. Even a young Green Beret, all the young Green Berets know this. And some of the CIA people would know it, some tiny subset. But the 7 phases of a U.S.-sponsored unconventional war, right? In other words, how to make rebellions and that sort of thing. The 7th phase is what's called demobilization, right? So when you're a U.S.-sponsored unconventional war, is usually you're trying to install puppets. You're like puppet governments or whatever that are more amenable to our ways, right? And so the 7th phase of that unconventional war is what's called demobilization, basically making the puppet go back to be a farmer, right? Make the army that you raised up, making it go and do something, be a taxi driver again. Meanwhile, it's already formed its own things, right? It's another thing. And so now, like with the Scots-Irish, they were used and they were sort of little, go fight the Cherokee for us. And the English, they were living in the nicer parts of North Carolina and whatnot. And then the Scots-Irish, they get their own life, right? The puppet got a life, right? This is what happened with Israel. This is what happened with the Zionists. This is what happened with Charlie Kirk, is what I think. Charlie Kirk was a little puppet, right? They had been, fertilizing him for, more than 10 years and at least more than 10 minimum, right? And raised him up. And like Pinocchio, by the way, Pinocchio is the 3rd most translated book in history, right? Number 1 is the Bible. Yeah. Number 1 is the Bible. And number 2, I think, is The Little Prince, and then Pinocchio. Why Pinocchio? Pinocchio is something that people resonate with. We all know about puppets. We've all been puppets. When I was a Green Beret, we trained for 3 years, hard training to parachute into Poland to routes and resources to interdict this railway system if the Soviets had invaded. Anyway, but I didn't know what I know now, right? I realize now I would have been a little puppet with my puppet A-team to go in there and fight like hell, which we would have done. And now I realize that, you get older and you study more and more and more, and you realize, wow, we were going to go fight routes and resources. And I was ready to go full kamikaze. I would have certainly died on that mission, right? And I was ready to do it, right? I mean, this is no kidding, 3 years of training for that mission, right? And very detailed. But what I'm getting to is puppets. Often the puppet gets a life of its own. And in Pinocchio, remember in Pinocchio, the story, the original came out in 1883, right? And the original, I've got one of the original books. It came out in 1883, I think. It's very important because, you see these puppets. It's important to understand how this puppetry works. In the original Pinocchio, this carpenter had this piece of wood and he was going to make it into a table leg. And the thing's like, ow, the piece of wood's like got a life. So the carpenter like gives it to another guy who makes a puppet out of it. And because he's like, it's got a life, right? And it's like, something's wrong. It's frightened him to begin with, the carpenter. And then Pinocchio, no sooner is Pinocchio made than he attacks the puppet maker. And he runs off and Pinocchio tries to get the puppet maker put in jail. He's a professional victim. Pinocchio is a professional victim right from the beginning, right? And the story goes on and on and on, and Pinocchio gets a life of his own, and finally he wants to be a boy. He wants to have a life of his own. This is how it works in real life. And I think, I've studied mythology for years. I've infiltrated a cult and lived with them and that sort of thing. I've read stacks and stacks of books on cult making and mythology, all the Joseph Campbell stuff, all that stuff, right? It took years. And now I see things in a very different way. I see how they're doing it, right? I see how it's actually, I see how the puppet making is actually done. And again, that's why Pinocchio, look at Charlie Kirk, recently killed, obviously killed by Zionists, right? And
why'd you say obviously?
Well, let's lay down the fact pattern. Well, actually, let's scale back out a little bit. Let's put a different lens on the camera. Not look at Charlie Kirk. Let's look at the larger fact pattern. After he was killed, the evidence was immediately disassembled. The stage, the whole works, right? They're blaming some guy on the roof, which obviously didn't take the shot. That's obvious, like naked bullshit, right? So there's that. So obviously the guy on the roof did not disassemble the evidence, right? He's not the one that sanitized and literally paved over the platform that he was on. And they've remodeled that area in this short time, right? Obviously. Trump's so-called assassination attempt. Also, I was the first one calling that out, going, that bullet trace shot is utter bullshit, right? I used the same camera, camera that he used is sitting right over there.
Utter shit. If it's utter shit, he's in on it. I just want to quickly say something. As a surgeon, a ballistic high-velocity round zipping past the ear, I mean, it would have shredded his ear. I mean, he didn't even have a scratch. And also, when he goes down and comes back up, he's got some blood streaking down his cheek. But when he does this, there's nothing on his white collar of his shirt, cuff of his shirt.
Right.
There's nothing on the palm of his hand. I mean, he's grabbed his ear. There should be blood everywhere, for God's sake. Nothing. And then he's got time to put his hand up and go, yeah, whatever. I mean, if any decent, proper security service, secret service, if they weren't paid actors, if they were proper secret service, they would have bundled him in a car and he would disappear. You'd never see him again. The whole thing was just bullshit. Folks, as you know, I've got no sponsors for the show, so no one pays me money to place ads. I do have an affiliate page, a shop page. So if you visit my website, docmalik.com, you'll see there's a shop page, and you can look at Hunter Gather. They do great food. We've been using them for years before even I started the podcast, and there's a little code you can use there. And there's a lovely sauna company, Wellness Hercules, that has an affiliate code with me. They have brilliant saunas and cold plunges. I highly recommend you visit my page and have a look at that. And there'll be some other ones as well, like sea green supplements with iodine and micronutrients. Like I said, they don't sponsor me, but if you buy from them, I do get a little tiny percentage, and it will go a long way to supporting the show. Folks, I also want to say thanks to all of you who've been leaving reviews on Spotify, the 5-star reviews. I've seen that they've gone up. I can't thank you enough. And also on Apple Podcasts. And on that note, I just want to say thanks to Antonia Eastwood, who wrote the following comment. Entertaining and informative, 5 stars. I look forward to Doc Malik's podcast very much. He has a very good, easy to listen to style with informative, insightful, and interesting guests that will help you beat the system. I don't think there's been one episode where I haven't been entertained or informed. Thank you, Antonia, and thank you everyone else who's leaving reviews and sharing my content. It makes a difference. Okay, folks, back to the podcast, and thank you so much.
Yeah, clear. I mean, so and what did they do? They immediately disassembled all the evidence. They hosed off the roof where the guy was shot. When I've said that, some people are like, "Are you saying nobody got killed?" And I'm like, "Ceasefire." I did not say that. People clearly got killed. Just like on October 7th, people clearly got killed. On 9/11, people clearly got killed. Like, obviously, like maybe 3,000 on. But let's scale back out. Look, anytime you're confused, if somebody's intentionally trying to confuse you, they're your enemy, right? Straight up, right? And if they're covering up the evidence, like Charlie Kirk immediately covered everything up, right? Confusion being sowed, and that's our enemy. Whoever's sowing confusion, that's one of your enemy structures right there, right? Trump so-called assassination attempt, clear bullshit. Sowing a lot of confusion, took down the stage, hosed off the evidence on the top, yada, yada, yada. That's part of the larger fact pattern. Another part of the larger fact pattern, Epstein Island, right? So Epstein Island, where's all that, right? And then Epstein killed in jail, cameras didn't work, right? October 7th, right?
Listen, I'm gonna pretend to be Kash Patel. Trust me, bro.
Yeah.
Trust me, bro.
Kash
I can't
Patel.
do my. Yeah, I can't
You're
do
a
my.
doctor. Why are his eyes like that? I mean, why are his eyes like that?
I don't
Why?
know. He's on drugs.
It's quite intense. And I'm just like, you only need like 8 seconds looking at that guy, like as long as a bull riding event, to go, whoa, no, something ain't, clicking right here.
Something's not fucking right. Anyway, You're saying October the 7th. You were saying October 7th. Something's
October
not right
7th, USS Liberty. Anyway, at the end of the day, if you look at the larger fact pattern, I mean, when you're looking at situations, you should look at it with a microscope, keep changing lenses, and look at it finally. And historical precedent. You got to keep changing lenses. And sometimes, when you map things out, the map presents itself. How did I determine that Darien Gap was going to be a main invasion route and there's going to end up being a war in Panama? There will be. Because I look at the map and I look at history. It's like obvious, right? How could it not be? So back to Charlie Kirk. So what did Charlie Kirk do? We know that we're talking about Zionists that do absolute genocide. They pushed the death jab, covered up the evidence, right? You lost your first career for it. Now you're doing the one that the rest of it prepared you for is this. This is it. This is combat. And they covered up the evidence on the death jabs, right? And Masako, by the way, my wife, is in the middle of this stuff in Japan. She works with the top researchers. They're on the phone together multiple times a week or in person or doing stuff, right? Like Dr. Yasufumi Murakami, he's the one that's been doing the big studies over there and the fatalities and all that. They're good friends. So, I'm right in the middle. I've got a front row seat of this in Japan, right? And second row seat in the United States. And so it's very interesting to watch. So, again, same players. Trump is a Zionist. He's pushing it hard. Netanyahu or Maliakovsky pushing it hard. He's got a mounted needle. It's a clear weapon of war, the jabs, right? Covered up the evidence. So let's look at this. We know they'll do genocide because millions of people already are dead from the jabs. Millions. We don't even know how many. It looks like at least 600,000 Japanese, right? That's just Japanese, right? And that doesn't include injuries and fertility and that sort of thing. So, fact pattern. They will do genocide. Gaza is a clear genocide, right? And so, again, amazingly obvious. So, killing somebody for a movie set, that's nothing to them. They'll kill 500 people. That's nothing. Look, more than 1,000 for October 7th. Apparently more than 1,000 were killed. Hostages taken. Somebody took them. Who took the hostages? They say it was the people in Gaza. How do we know that? How do we know at all that there was ever any hostages in Gaza? I don't know that because we know how they play. They may have taken hostages, all right, and they literally could be in a basement under Tel Aviv or someplace, or in probably in some military base. I don't know. I'm not positing that. I'm not saying that that's the truth. I'm saying that is in keeping with the fact pattern, right? It wouldn't be bizarre to think that at all. So Charlie Kirk, so he had clearly been toting the water for those who can speak old dialect, toting the water for the for the Zionists for years, and he's been pushing their agendas and that sort of thing. And then he starts going off the reservation. Why did he go off the reservation? I think what happened, I don't know, of course, because I can't read his mind, but what it appears to me is that Charlie Kirk, he was enabled so that he could be he's a puppet. He's clearly a puppet. Trump is one of his puppet masters, and Netanyahu, but above them is other puppet masters. But so he's a puppet of a puppet of a puppet, and his job is to herd the millions of young people who are clearly leaving the support base of the Zionists, of Israel, right? And which are not completely synonymous, because Zionists, if Israel is basically an aircraft carrier for Zionists. It's like the Zionists don't depend on Israel. It's just a very useful tool, right? It's part of a larger structure. But so at the end of the day, Charlie Kirk was very persuasive with that crowd of people, right? And he would travel, he was just over in Japan. In fact, he was meeting with people that Masako knows quite well and that I've met with. In fact, I watched Charlie Kirk talking about the Japanese situation. He was actually talking our talking points, right? I never met Charlie Kirk, but he was literally saying the things that that's how this works, right? So he was a puppet, right? And so Charlie Kirk, though, he was going off script. His base was clearly leaving him. So Charlie Kirk is only valuable to his puppet master, who is obviously enabling him, flying him all over the world, huge money, pretty wife, all these things. And so he's a puppet, and he's got these other people he needs to puppet. But his base, he doesn't control it completely. He's like a cowboy. He influences that herd, but it can stampede. And that herd was stampeding, right? And that herd was like, what about Epstein? Where's the Epstein release? How come I can't pay for my student loans? Why are we spending hundreds of billions of dollars on Israel? And they're telling us that, if we don't support them, that we're anti-Semitic or whatever, which is completely racist in and of itself. The whole structure of Israel is based on genetic racism. You know what I mean? Like the actual saying that you're anti-Semitic if you don't support Israel is actually saying that I'm a racist and you're against my race. And you know what I mean? And I'm God's chosen people because of my genes. It doesn't get any more racist than that. But anyway, not to go down that rabbit hole. But but Charlie Kirk.
Sorry. You don't believe that white. I mean, the reason why Ashkenazi Jews look like white Europeans is because they are white Europeans. They're not Semitic. You know, the Palestinians.
Not at all. Amelia Kovsky's whiter than we are. I mean, I'm white now because the light's too bright. But I mean, usually I'm a little bit darker. The light's a little brighter. But he's a very white guy, right? Meliakovsky. His name is Meliakovsky. Same as the guy down in Argentina. Mele. His name's Meliakovsky. Maybe they're related. I have no idea. But they have the same last name. Meliakovsky,
I've
right?
thought the same, by the way. I thought the same, and they all touch the wall. The Roman fort. It's very important. You touch that wall. Show your puppet master that you're playing ball. But anyway, yeah, you're right. The anti-Semitic thing is a complete joke. I mean, the people there are Semitic, and they they are the original Semitic people. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Move on.
Well,
Charlie Kirk.
Let me finish on the Charlie Kirk. So
Yeah.
Charlie, he was a puppet of a puppet. Clearly both. Trump, because he was always with Trump, and I'm with President Trump again. Why would anybody want to be associated with that, right? I could easily be in those circles, by the way. Easily, right? I've been offered so many times with the exact same language. You could have a seat at the table. I'm like, you think I'm going to be associated with you people who are pushing the death jabs? Some of my family and friends have been death jabbed, right? You're not my friends, and I'm not going to pretend that you are, right? It's just not going to happen, right? That's a bridge too far. It's over the line, right? And but when it comes to Charlie Kirk, he had at least two major puppet masters. He had, Trump and Netanyahu, and then whatever other structures are throwing big money at him. And then, but he was clearly afraid of the Zionists, right? Why would you be afraid of them if they're not terrorists, right? And so, but his base, Charlie Kirk's base, the herd was ready to stampede Epstein Island, hundreds of billions of dollars going to Israel when they can't pay their student loans, doing genocide in Gaza. It's naked for everybody to see. Trying to get us in World War III with Russia, doing the Ukraine thing, obviously Iran, all these different things in the base. They're young students, but they're not stupid, right? You know what I mean? They're like, I can't pay my student loans. We've got all these doctors and whatnot, as you know, like I think the average American medical school graduate owes about $250,000 in student loans, right? And, and like that makes them built-in puppets. Remember, the four main cheeses of recruitment, mice is the four main cheeses: money, ideology, coercion, and ego. Those are the four main cheeses that are used. And Trump, he's an easy one. He's two of the cheeses. He's money and ego, which is me, M-E, me, money and ego. That's your me mouse, right? I don't see any, his ego is over the top. People that are ego driven, you can pay them with their ego, right? And if he's money driven, it's just a matter of price. He's clearly both, right? And so when it comes to coercion, you don't need to coerce him. You probably got like a whole library of stuff you can use as coercion, but in reality, money and ego. But for the people that don't have enough money or access, they can use coercion if you can't hit them with the military. But then there's the ideology. I'm not sure he has any ideology. I mean, he says he's a Zionist, but Trump is in his core, the deep down nucleus of that guy, at the quantum level, that guy is a narcissist, and a narcissist is going to don the snakeskin of the power around him. If the Hindus were more powerful, he would be, worshiping Shiva or Vishnu. He would be he would be a Jesuit. If it was Catholics, he would be, he would be talking in tongues if it was another group, right? That's just who he is. That is the nature of that person.
Agreed.
You can spot your same and you can spot your opposite, right? You can spot like you and I are very similar. I can see that instantly, and just the whatever. It's not just because we got gray hair, but so I can predict more closely what you're going to do than I can the average person, because I can tell we have similar personalities, right? Trump has the opposite of us, so that's why I can predict him very well. Because I just take what would I do, And the polar opposite, I think Trump will do this. Bingo. And he does it. Look how accurate. Take a dart. You can predict Trump very well, doctor. Just imagine what you would do and reverse it. And watch how accurate it is. It'll be stunningly accurate, right? And a lot of people can't predict him well because they have a different personality set than like you lost your career fighting Dak on the death jab. I've lost a lot fighting a lot of tremendous access that I can have. No question about it. But I feel better. Yeah, I have an ideology because on the mice, I'm ideology, right? I'm ideologically driven, right? I'm not coercion. People have tried for years to get stuff on me. I'm like, the most you get on me always makes me look better. You know what I mean? It's like, because I don't have really any nasty laundry. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't exist. People have tried and tried and tried. I've actually got a boring life except for lots and years of combat and that sort of stuff and cannibal hunting and all that. But other than that, it's actually kind of boring. It's like, I don't have any large history of like robbing a bank or something. People often bring up that I killed some guy in a fist fight one time, which I did. And it's well known. It's well known. And, the guy attacked me and yada, yada, yada. And, it was self-defense. Everybody knows it happened. And it was all on the news at the time. And so what? I mean, and I was able to stay in special forces after that. Right. So in other words, I still kept my secret security clearance. And after I was cleared of the charges and all that stuff, it was like, yeah, the guy attacked me. There were witnesses all over the place, and I fought back, and he died. Right? It was an accident, and it's the way it went. And so that's the only thing they've ever, got on me. And every time they bring that up, it sells more of my book, Danger Close. Right? And so, I mean, it's which is not really in print anymore, but it's out there. You can get it online. I haven't even mentioned that title in years, but I mean, it's the name of. Or very rarely do I bring it up, but anyway, because I told that story in there because for years that was when I turned against media. I was 19 years old when it happened, and I realized I was like, wait a minute, this just happened, and the only witnesses are on my side. All of them are on my side, and all of them, including the guy's brother, right? And I noticed how the media handled it, and ever since that time, and I learned a lot about the justice system from that. And ever since that time, I was very, standoffish with the media. You know what I mean? Just because I had seen it firsthand when you get to that firsthand experience. But anyway, when it came to Charlie Kirk, I think this is my guess is that Charlie Kirk is ideologically driven. He also is money driven, I think. And I think he's ego driven as well. I think he's more ego driven and more money driven than I am, but he's also ideologically driven, which is a strength, actually, if it's a good ideology or it could be an enemy if it's an enemy ideology. But that I think he at his core also was strongly ideologically driven, but politically driven as well. Ego. His base was leaving him, so he would be useless to his puppet masters if his herd leaves him. Right, if his base leaves him because of Gaza, Iran, all this money, Epstein Island, and Epstein mysteriously dying and all these things, then Charlie would be worthless to everybody, right? He would just be an average blogger, right? His strings would probably be cut and that would be it, right? Or at least it would be, the flow would and the flow would go to somebody else, right? And I think this is just my guessing. Charlie decided the strings are pulling both directions. My base is going that way, and my bosses want this thing. And Charlie went with them. Because if he had any presidential aspirations, which was clear that, I mean, you could smell it, that he would need to stay with that base. But that would be, for whatever reasons, whether it was ideologically driven or ego driven, I think for whatever his motivations were, I don't know, it was probably complex, but I think he decided to stay with the base. And it got him killed.
Yeah,
because at that point.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say I love that, and I really like that viewpoint because some people are saying he was waking up. And I'm like, the guy's smart enough. He knew perfectly well what was happening. It just didn't pay for him to say anything. But something made him change his tune. And I think your idea that his base was shifting, he was like, oh, if they're leaving me, well, I need to say what they want to hear now. I mean, I think that's what it is. He was saying, Nick Fuentes is on one side. I'm not going to go full on Nick Fuentes, but I'm going to start calling out some of the stuff that my base wants to hear. Like, it is a why is Israel dictating terms to the US? He's becoming critical, but it's not this sudden awakening. I don't believe that. I mean, these guys are smart. And, there's people like that in the medical movement that, they speak out against COVID, but they don't speak out against the childhood vaccines. And they go, oh, the childhood vaccines, they're amazing. Don't tell me that you're up there speaking against COVID and telling me you're critical of big pharma and the medical industrial complex, yet you're still promoting the childhood vaccines. You know perfectly well the childhood vaccines are shit, but it doesn't pay for you at this moment in time to criticize them. It will close doors for you. So you will pretend that they're safe, even though deep down they're not. And these people are narcissists. It's ego, money driven, fame driven, and they'll say and do whatever it takes to become popular and successful and rich, and they have no integrity. And that I isn't just ideology, it's also integrity. And I think you are a man of integrity, and a lot of people haven't got that.
No, they're cowards, and cowards. I mean, cowardice contains the seeds of treason. All cowards are natural traitors, right? Just like every professional victim that you see is a predator. I've never seen an exception. That goes on the personal level, up to family level, up to cultural levels, right? There are people that are just professional victims at the cultural level. Those will be predators at the cultural level, right? And cowards, cowards will always be traitors. Because they don't have, you have to have courage to have loyalty. How can you be loyal without courage? And so, I mean, sometimes you don't need much courage to be loyal. It's just, your day-to-day living to be loyal. But sometimes you need straight up courage. And when that day comes, they're going to do with whoever. That's why terrorism works so much. Terrorism works on the people that will crumble. And remember, the people using terrorism, like the Zionists do on a daily basis, they're genociding Gaza and death jabs and all kinds of things, right? That they don't, those people, I mean, let me tell you what happened here in Thailand, by the way. All the children were taken by their schools to get jabbed. And school's mandatory here. You have to go there's no homeschooling in Thailand. All the children in Thailand were jabbed. There might be a few squirters out there that, family took them out of the country and didn't get them jabbed. But for the most part, all the children were jabbed in Thailand. I don't know what effects that's going to have in the future. We're going to find out. We'll know in the next 10 or 15 years, won't we? We'll start to see the effects.
That Thai princess died. I mean, that happened. But listen, let's go back a bit. So Kissinger made a deal with China. And they went forward suddenly, rapidly after that off the books, arrangement, that unofficial visit he did in the thawing of the Chinese relationship there. But I don't understand this because, there's been a controlled demolition of the West since the 70s. It's in limits to growth, Committee of 300. They want to deindustrialize the West. They want to sap away all of its energy and resources, and they're building up China. Why would the Zionists do that? They had the West all wrapped up. They had the industries.
I think it's part of their firmware. I think it's part of their old firmware, like their cultural firmware to destroy. There are clearly some that will. Now, this will, as per always, it'll get complex. Like, there's a lot of Catholics that did a big Inquisition, and you know what I mean, that went for centuries.
Yeah, but I just want to.
And there's a lot of Jews that.
I want to just make it clear that not all Zionists are Jews, and a lot of
Most
Jews
are not.
Yeah, and a lot of Jews are not Zionists. I mean, you just need to look at feeds like Voice of Rabbis. British Jews have long stood firmly against Zionism. So by the way, just if
they send me messages all the time. They're standing up against those guys. They send me messages. Those guys are clearly standing up to the Zionists, and most of the Zionists appear to be American Christians, right? And I know quite a few of them. I grew up with them, right? I mean, I grew up being taught that the Israelis are God's children, right? I didn't know any difference.
But
I mean, 'cause
again, are they just puppets? Are they just being brainwashed? What I'm trying to say is,
yeah, they're puppets. They're
just.
I mean, the ones just like the Scots Irish were used to fight the Cherokee and other tribes. A lot of these people that were, encouraged to go to Israel. There was no flag for Israel in the Rand McNally 1947 Atlas. You know what I mean? There's of all the flags on the earth, there was no Israel flag there, right? 1948, they had to get their flag. And all these people that were brought in, just like Scots Irish in America, were brought in, and other groups that were brought in to fight. Sometimes it was one group of Indians brought in to fight another group of Indians, right? It's normal, right? And one of the things, by the way, that the British are very good at is persuading people that that's your land, right? Like, go get it. Like Rohingya, getting the Rohingya to think that, hey, that's our land, right? And the Rohingya, man, they're professional victims. It's unbelievable. I've been out with them quite and that's why Thais can't put up with Rohingya. They like, get out of here, right? they're always demanding stuff, and they don't say thank you. Thais so when you ask Thais, what's your problem with Rohingya? They're like, they're always demanding stuff. We give them everything, and they don't even say thank you. They just demand more. I'm like, where have I heard that?
I know people like that. You just keep giving, and it's never enough, and there's no gratitude.
Yeah,
I know people like that. I know. It's not good. So anyway, I love that. Professional victims are always the predators. I used to always think of it as that every abuser has been abused, but not every abused becomes an abuser. But almost every abuser has at its core been abused themselves. But yeah, these professional victims, yeah.
All of us, all of our, whatever culture you're from, has been a victim. I don't know any culture that I've been with, and I spend most of my time out of the United States. Most of my life has been out in jungles or deserts with people. I just got my new Afghan clothes made because they're more comfortable to wear around the house. You know what I'm saying? I wore that for, their clothes are so much more comfortable than ours.
The shalwar kameez.
Yeah, much more comfortable. And
they are.
But when I went back to America and I was wearing it, people were like, "What, do you become Muslim?" I'm like, "I'm telling you, this is like a straight jacket compared to their clothes." You know what I mean? It's like, anyway. Next time I'll be wearing it.
I don't think Japanese are perpetual victims. I mean, they got bombed.
You know who else is not?
Germans.
English are not professional victims, even though the English language can have some professional victim built in. English are not.
Yeah.
Japanese are not. Koreans are. Many Chinese are. Depends on the species. There's a lot of different sorts, And Thais are not. Thais are not professional victims.
What about Malays?
I don't know about Malays. I've been down there quite a lot, but I don't know actually.
Are they tough like the Thai? Are they different?
Oh, they're
people?
tough. Yeah, they're tough. Yeah. But I haven't spent as much time with the Malays, right? Most of my time in Asia has been, a lot of it's been Thailand, and also it's been a year in India, a year in Nepal, and been up to Tibet, and in a lot in China, all over 25 countries in Asia. I've been all over this place.
What's Vietnam? What's Vietnam like? They're falling.
I like it. They're tough people.
I know, but they're falling. That whole digital ID, the debanking, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What's happening with that? Interestingly, here's an interesting topic. I had a meeting the other day with somebody very, very serious, man. And he told us about what happened during the jabs. And I'm going to go back to Vietnam with this. He told us about the jabs in Philippines, right? And he's like, the top people that he deals with in Philippines, they were persuaded through probably money to do the lockdowns, right? But then they were also persuaded. Masako actually asked him, she said, but were they also told that they should take the jab, the top Philippine leadership? And he said, yes, which is interesting because I know from various people that I know who are in, very serious high level corporate, that a lot of the people in these big companies, top leadership, also took the jabs in the wild, not placebo, like straight up in the wild, like normal people will get them, because a lot of the people in these top people in various companies have taken the jabs, and they were some of the hardest pushers of the jabs. And that's why I keep telling them, if you took the jab in the wild and nobody warned you not to take it, there's no seat for you on the dark art. I don't care if you're a billionaire and you're flying around on your jet and all that stuff. If they didn't tell you not to take it, to them, you're a roadkill, right? They're planning on taking your stuff. That's it. Bottom line, right? And that goes for royalty. That goes for if nobody told you, it's time to change alliance, because somebody just tried to assassinate you and may have actually succeeded. You just haven't gotten the message yet, right? I mean, so you may have actually already been lethally shot, and we're not going to know until time unfolds, right? How do we know? And but actually, at the end of the day, for a lot of these people who think that they're part of the in club, I used to tell that to the Scott Adams guy, that Dilbert dude, and he blocked me actually eventually. I'm like, listen, you're pushing dope, you're pushing the jab, and he's clearly M and E. He's money and ego. He's Mr. I'm Scott Adams, and I'm in the in group and all this crap. Where I'm like, if they told you to take the jab and you're actually trying to persuade people to take it and you took it, which he did, and now he's dying, right? You're just not in the in club. You think you are. They're patting you on the head. Oh yeah, you're going to be with us and chilling out. And there's only going to be 700 million people left on earth, and you're going to be one of them. And you're one of everybody, all the others will be your slaves. And you took the jab and goodbye, right? This is war. We don't have time. We don't have time for deductive reasoning and all these things, right? As a doctor, as you know, sometimes you have to use your intuition, because this is combat. We don't have time to go through all these studies that most of us are not going to be able to make heads or tails out of anyway. And even if so, as a first principle, we don't know if the studies are accurate or if they're just another part of the information war, which they would have been. And it would take years to do the studies on the jabs anyway. It took 40 years to figure out that synthetic estrogen would cause cervical cancer in the unborn daughters of women who took it for fertility. 40 years, right? So, but they're like, oh no, we've tested it. And I'm like, oh no, something's wrong here. This is a clear combat situation. This is an ambush, right? And oftentimes that the trap that you see is not really the biggest trap. Often the trap that you see is to make you think you're clever. Oh, I see that trap. You're actually standing on the real trap, right? You're actually standing on the big one. Or it's there's traps within traps within traps, right? You'll drive people into the real trap. Oftentimes we'd stage a small ambush to drive people into the real ambush, or to drive them into a minefield, that sort of thing, right? It's normal combat, right? And that's what happens in information war too. You're like, hey, we figured this one out. This is a trap. And so look at all the people when they had those different types, the mRNA thing, and I'm not going to name the names of the companies, but the one that started with an A, the one started with a P and all that, right? So the names of the companies. So some people that think they're clever are like, I'm not going to take it because that will modify my genetic structure. So I'm going to take this one because I'm smart. It's like, dude, you just walked into the other ambush. They were both red pill or blue pill. You don't know either one. That guy is the same guy with the pills. You don't even know the guy. You're
100%.
Pill. Yeah.
100%. Listen, so just finishing up with that, Zionist takedown of the West, I feel like they go from one place to another. They build up places. So they build up the Netherlands and the Dutch Empire. Then they build up the English, British Empire. Then they build up the American Empire. But they move from one host to another because they're actually not loyal to any one country. And then they suck out that place as much as they can, and then when they've really made it sick to its core, they leave it before it causes them problems, and they find another place to go to. And you just need to look at America. Like, infrastructure is shit. The airports, there's no proper high-speed rail networks anywhere. China's putting up a coal-fired power station every week, nuclear power stations, building bridges high as you can get, like 2,500 feet above the ground in like literally a matter of months. Like, they've got such incredible infrastructure, and the West is crumbling. America's crumbling, but you know what? They can spend billions in Ukraine and Israel, and you're just like, this is what happens. They hollow the places out and then discard them on the roadside. That's the playbook, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a parasitoidal cultural firmware. I mean, it's a parasitoid is a parasite that kills the host, right? I mean, the firmware itself and that cultural firmware is parasitoidal. I mean, it's a parasitoid. I mean, it kills the host. and moves to the next, right? I mean, Israel itself it will be lucky to survive even 10 years. Israel's being destroyed by the same Zionist. Israel is destroyed. Literally, Israel. It looks like, I'm not sure about this, but it looks like the new Israel, or let's say a shift of the poles could be to Qatar, right? This is, I think, I'm not sure. Let's see how this plays out. But remember,
could be the what? Sorry, the Qatar.
Could be Qatar.
Oh wow.
Could be. Let's see.
I've heard some people say Ukraine.
Ukraine. No, okay, that's separate. That would be where a lot of the people would go to. A lot of the settlers would go to potentially. But when it comes to power structures, remember, the people that went to Israel to fight the Palestinians, to the big players, they don't care about your holy land. They don't care about that. Their holy land is that Suez Canal. Their holy land is the spinal cord of the British Empire at that time, right? They want control over the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal and the Strait of Malacca and all that, right? They want those things. But the next level down, that's the people you get riled up like, hey, we're going to get our holy land. And then you brainwash tens of millions of Americans with the Schofield Bible and whatnot to, hey, like me, we got to take care of the magical elves of Israel because they're genetically superior to all the rest of us, right? And so according to this firmware, they are genetically chosen by God to be our masters, right? Okay. I don't buy that crap. It's like, it's over. It's over. Every time somebody throws the anti-Semite card now, I'm like, that's like a magic wand that is now, they go, anti-Semite. I'm like, dude, it just backfired. Bam! You just got shot by your own. It's like, anti-Semite, anti-Jew. It's like the thing is broken. The magic wand is broken. It's in the fireplace, crackling away. It's burned away, right? The magic wand doesn't work anymore. That information war is crumbling. They're gonna, of course, they will. They'll evolve and find ways, through that because it's a resilient system. But the firmware will find other ways that keep it going. But at the end of the day, it's a parasitoid. It's a firmware. It's a firmware, right? And it's not genetically. It's a firmware that can leap in different races. It's just like people can, join a different cult that are from all kinds of different races. It's not genetically specific. It's a firmware, right? That's it. And, when I was in India, I spent a year in India, I've been to 99 countries, right? That I've actually, no kidding, been to, not airport stops, but most of my life has been in other countries. And I divide the world into two countries at this point, India and everybody else, right? So like India, my year in India was like the most educational year. Everything there happens at a high rate of energy. It's like being in a particle accelerator for belief systems, right? I mean, you can smash two religions together at nearly the speed of light, and a third syncretism just pops right out in real time. You're like, hey, I just saw a cult form right in front of me. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I saw a cult form in 1 week. You know what I mean? It's like, that's one of the things about war, why a lot of doctors like to go to war, actually, because you get so much experience so fast, right? And India is like that when it comes to, India is like that. If you're going to study anthropology, you're going to study mythology, go to India, man. That's your own particle accelerator. But again, you might yourself end up getting caught in a cult. And the only cult people never see is the cult they're in, right? You can see everybody else's cult, like, hey, that poor guy's in a cult. He's ringing bells and wearing this new uniform, wearing orange all the time. And it's like, but we're in a cult and we just like completely don't see it. Or if you push it out, we'll get cognitive dissonance and get angry and stomp off and, throw the microphone across the room or something. But, it's like the only cult you never see is the one you're in. And
bingo.
Another thing, too, is the level of education you have or the wealth is absolutely irrelevant compared to it's not even part of the equation on whether or not you'll get a cold or a cult, and it's like, so these big, huge people that you might like, hey, those guys run huge companies and yet they took the death jab. It's irrelevant. They made a cult around the death jab. That was literally, I watched the cult. I'm like, this is what I saw in India. They've just created another cult in real time, right? And they did it instantly because the system is down. You know, the art and artifices, and now they've got all this data collected on us that, you know, it's easy to custom make cults now, right? Let's say I want a cult that actually likes this group and hates that group, and you can custom make a cult now in real time that is like it's like what's it called when you have a machine that can make 3D printing? You can like 3D print a cult. You can just send the engineer what you want. Hey, I need a cult that makes us want to take California back, right? Like I'm watching the Chinese now. I've been all over China looking at their museums and whatnot, and because I study museum warfare quite a lot, and I've been to so many museums in the world, and I can see that China is making a hate campaign against, especially Japan, right? And because every war that I've ever studied radiates a lot of information in advance. I've never seen a war just start cold-footed. Whether you're reading a historical war from 200 years ago or something, it radiates information in advance. And if you're tuned into it, and sometimes it's like blinding you. You have to like close your eyes not to, you know, and like it's clear that China is going to go to war with Japan. It's amazingly obvious to me, right? And because they're creating that magic energy that you need for war, which is hatred, right? You need atrocity porn.
Yeah, because the thing is, sorry for interrupting. The thing is, most human beings, no matter where you are in the world, are pretty much the same. They just want to have sex with their wife. The wife doesn't necessarily want to have sex with the husband. They want to have a lot of food. They want to look after their kids and see them play in the park and have a roof over their heads and just hang out with their friends. That's what most people want. They just want a happy life. And nobody wants to go out and kill someone else. Like the idea of killing someone and taking their life, not something someone wants to do, generally speaking. And to then convince people to send off their children and to volunteer themselves to go abroad to die for your country or to go and kill someone else, that's a lot. That's a lot. So to do that, you need to other them. You need to make the other group seem evil beyond you have to throw in rape and, you know, and all that kind of stuff.
They always throw that in. They always
killing babies. Rape and killing babies.
With the baby, always.
Yeah. So rape and killing babies, and they're subhuman, and, you know, it's our righteous duty to go and defeat the enemy. That's how you do it. And it's a playbook again and again and again. So yeah, it's scary that China's come to that. But I want to talk about World War III. But before we do that, you know, you talked about the host parasitoidal thing, you know, and it goes from one place to another. Where do you think they're going to set up as their next new empire? Where's that base going to be?
It's a good question. We talk about that quite a lot. It's a very good question. I think, for instance, so there's some prime real estate in places like Ireland. We went to Ireland 3 or 4 years ago looking at it because we realized they're trying to and working to clear Ireland. You know, that's being invaded. I get constant updates from Ireland now. That would be a nice place. Obviously, they want, I think, as the European capital will probably be Netherlands. And I've been saying that for years, and I have specific reasons to say that. One is the two biggest ports in Europe are Rotterdam and the Netherlands, and just south of that at Antwerp, right, in Belgium. And you'll see that they're working on something called Tri-State City. And Masako and I have spent a lot of time in Netherlands looking into this, in Belgium and all around. And Tri-State City, now Netherlands, first of all, this has been going on for a long time. As you know, Netherlands first started coming heavy on the dope in, was it the 1980s, right? I mean, they're clear. I mean, if you were going to take over a place in Europe, I would take Netherlands, because that's the mouth of the Rhine River. Like, you know, I've got the Thai Rhine River right here. The Rhine River of Europe is like the Mississippi of Europe, right? And it dumps out at the biggest harbor in Europe, which is Rotterdam, right? And so if you and you know, that's what I would take. I would destroy Nord Stream, which we successfully predicted many times, and then it happened. And there's only two suspects, and that's United States and space aliens, and that's basically it. It doesn't mean the United States was the sole proprietor of that, but I mean, whoever's in charge of there you go. There's the Rhine River. Notice it starts in Switzerland. You can go all the way up to Basel. Basel is, by the way, at the headwaters there. You could go from a kayak from right outside my window, right up that river, all the way to Basel, by the way. And Basel is where the BIS is, by the way, coincidentally, the Bank of International Settlements, the bank of the bank. And there's an interesting book on that called The Tower of Basel, not the Tower of Babel, but the Tower of Basel. And Basel, that's where the BIS is, the Bank of International Settlements. There's a really good book on that called The Tower of Basel. I highly suggest reading it. It's about the history and the formation of the Bank of International Settlements, right? It's an amazing book. And as you know, a few years ago, the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, also made gold a tier 1 asset, which is, look at gold's like almost 4,000 an ounce now, or what is it? It's getting close. And so, anyway, but it's
no, but you're right. At the Bank of International Settlement, just quickly, absolutely extra sovereign powers. No one can go into the Bank of Settlement office. No one can arrest.
That's right.
The Bank of International Settlement agent or official or employee. They don't need passports. They don't need to be searched. They can travel wherever they want, unhindered, unhampered. No one can investigate them or audit them. No one can invade them. No one can police them. It's fucking insane.
I read that because that's clearly the or a bank of the people that are really in charge.
Right? Yeah,
because
exactly.
They've got ultimate powers, right? And it's funny that it's at the headwaters of the Rhine River, basically the Mississippi of Europe. But what would I do? I would have multiple headquarters, as you know, like in one obviously in Asia, but when you look at, let's say, how the United States is structured, our commercial headquarters obviously was more New York, right?
Yeah.
And then we had and then of course, Washington D.C. and whatnot. But I think that's how it would end up being there with what's unfolding as well. Bank of International Settlements is up there in Switzerland, but interestingly, Switzerland also has had some migrante, which is strange. I think why do they have that? See, that doesn't fit the fact pattern. So I have to be careful with that theory, because why would Switzerland then allow themselves to be, why would the big players, if they wanted to make their headquarters there, why would they allow that there? Unless they're trying to also erode that demographic architecture there. Like, let's go back to Ireland. If Ireland, I'll pick that because it's a nice island, right? So if you invade that, which is being done, and then you clear out the Irish, which has been a long going process.
They keep doing it.
The English have tried to get rid of the Irish for I don't know how long. I mean, they had the 1840s and 1845ish to 1854ish famine, right? And people argue when it began and ended, but in that period, and that the population has never recovered from that famine either.
Did it happen even earlier? It happened with Cromwell.
Yeah, there was other famine. Yeah,
and Cromwell was funded by people from the Netherlands. He was funded by the people in the Netherlands to overthrow the King of England, and then he allowed certain group of people to come into the city of London. And one of the first things they wanted indentured slaves in the American plantations. So Cromwell basically rounded up a whole bunch of Irish and sent them off packing. And Dr. Anne McCloskey talks about this.
Yeah.
The first slaves were white. They were white Irish. It wasn't black slaves.
Tons.
Yeah, tons.
Red legs, or that's what they call them down in Barbados, right? They call them red legs. There's still red legs down there, I think. And not as slaves, but they're anyway. Separate story. But but Irish, yeah, definitely. And the English have tried to genocide the Irish for a long time. Down in the Republic of Ireland, of course, Catholics versus Protestants. It's interesting when you go up to Belfast and you look at that giant wall up there. I mean, I'm like, that wall's bigger than the southern border wall, and that's between Protestants and Catholics. I took Masako there. I'm like, this is unbelievable. That wall's bigger than that's bigger than Trump's wall that we're at sometimes. And that's to separate white guy Irish from white guy Irish, Protestants and Catholics. And but that's all part of the larger, routes and resources war, divide and conquer. I've got a bunch of old books in my library in Japan that are all about English doing basically demographic farming, like how to, the overpopulation of whales or whatever, and all during these time periods, right? And they're all how to basically, these are how-to books, right? They're actually how to do it, right? So this is big boy war is demographics, it's currency, it's weights and measures. Actually, it's all kinds of things that most people don't even recognized at all.
So demographic war. I mean, I keep hearing in certain channels that, you know what, there's a war on the West, on white people, on Christianity, and the people in power, whoever they might be, I don't know who they are, but they want to destroy white Christian West. They want to get rid of white people. They want to get rid of Christianity. Do you think that's true?
Clearly. I think it's really obvious. It's a long process. It takes centuries, right? These aren't like, for instance, clearing the Irish off of Ireland. This has been going on for a long, long time. It took the United States, the thing with the Native Americans is still ongoing, right? I mean, Christopher Columbus, 1492, comes over, he runs into Cuba. He's like, hey, I found Japan. It was, Cuba. And, then he runs into, the Americas, and he's like, hey, I found India, right? If you look at the old maps, the Europeans on the old maps, I've got some of the old maps. We didn't even know that North and South America existed, despite millions of Indians that lived there with unknown numbers of languages and cultures, right? And my library on this is intense. It's wild. I spend so much time in it, right? I'll be up at 2 a.m. reading about this how this all unfolded. But at the end of the day, it took us centuries to wipe out the Indians. Centuries, right? Manifest Destiny. By the time Manifest Destiny started unfolding, it was already in advanced stages. You may have seen I'm sure you've seen the painting of American, what's it called? American Progress, right? But often Americans will call it the Manifest Destiny. And you look, it's the woman floating over. She's got a star on her head. She's holding a book that says school book, but it's not really a school book. It would be the Bible, but it says school book when you zoom in. Actually, I went to Kinko's and got that painting enlarged really big so that I can look at it in more close detail. But you see she's unfurling a telegraph wire. It's painting. It's called American Progress. And you'll see there's 3 railroads in there. The Southern Railroad, which I have the entire studies from the United States making the railroad between the Mississippi and the Pacific. But anyways, it's fascinating stuff. And there's a Central Railroad, the Chinese worked on, and then the Northern Railroad, right? And so you can see the trains in that painting coming across, and they're pushing the bears and the buffaloes and the Indians in front of them, right? That's Manifest Destiny, right? The triangle of Manifest Destiny was spreading Christianity. This is routes and resources. That's what it's all about. Spreading Christianity and basically taking the land. And, commercial, right, is another aspect. And then geostrategic. Like, for instance, when we took Hawaii, the missionaries want their resources to make people into, Christians. And then there is the, like Dole and all those people with their, agriculture and cattle. Obviously, a lot of cattle there in Hawaii, but also geostrategic. I mean, if we didn't take Hawaii, somebody else was going to do it, right? It would be China or Japan or Russia or Great Britain. Somebody was going to take it. So it was wise to take it. So, I mean, this is the way things just really actually are in the world. I mean, we can go, that's wrong, we shouldn't do that. But the bottom line is, this is the way it is. I mean, that's just the way that it is. The strong is going to do this. I was down with Brett Weinstein in the Darien Gap because I took him down there, and I've taken 70 or 80 people down, 60 or 70 people down there, congressmen, the whole works. And at one point, Brett Weinstein said, you keep saying they. And he said, who is they? They are doing this. I'm like, actually, I don't know all their names. We can see the structures, but it's like, who runs the jungle? I mean, I don't know who runs. He's an evolutionary biologist. Who runs the jungle? I don't know. I mean, it's not the crocodiles. It's not the jaguars here. It's not the monkeys. It's the jungle. I mean, who runs this thing? It's a complex system of complex systems, right? So there are people that have plans and big plans to do this and do that. And then, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and often the enemy is within, right? So there's obvious, when I say they, there's a lot of theys out there. There's the Chinese, but within the Chinese structures, they fight each other as well. There's the Shanghai people and all that. There's the Chinese that are overseas Chinese that don't want to have anything to do with the Chinese Communist Party. But the Chinese Communist Party is always trying to rope them into their structure, right? So, and so what I'm getting to is it takes years of study to even have a basic understanding of this. Like, you're not going to become a doctor in 1 year. You just ain't going to happen, right? And as you know, as your career progressed, you're learning. I mean, as humans, we didn't even know the heart was the heart pump until like 500 years ago or so, right?
Although,
We didn't know that.
Hi, me again. You're listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or on his Substack, or simply buy him a coffee with one of the donation links which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
although now there's a lot of evidence coming forward that it's not actually just a pump either. It's a very complicated vortex magnetic field generator type thing. It's weird. Anyway,
We don't know much at all. We don't know much at all.
Dude,
We're basically frogs on lily pads.
Dude, we really are. We don't know fucking jack shit. I mean, the older I get, I just turned 50 this summer, the less I know. I know fuck all. Like, I read all these books just like you behind me on my desk here. The more I read, the more I just scratch my head and go, all right, I've just got another 100 questions. That's
Exactly. But doesn't learning, the more you learn, the more interesting it becomes to learn more. It's like an addiction, like, Hunter Biden is to crack or whatever it was he's doing. And you get addicted to learning because it's just the more you learn, the more interesting the next book is.
Yeah.
Because you
tell me something.
incorporate it.
Why are they destroying Christian white West? Like, why? I mean, it's so nice. Europe is so lovely. It was so lovely before all the migrant crisis. It was just nice. It was nice before globalization. I'm old enough to remember when I went to Germany and on a high school trip, and it was really quaint, and they had their nice little high streets with their own little German shops and pastries and bakeries and God knows what. And then you go to Paris and France, and the shops are different there, and the food is different, and the language is different. It's all very clean and nice. Now it's a shithole. There's migrants everywhere. There's beggars on the streets selling tack and crap. The parks aren't safe. There's smell of urine everywhere. All the streets look the same. They've all got McDonald's and Nike stores and globalist, high street chains. It's just like, why?
I suspect, just based on years of study and seeing stuff, and it's intuitive, obviously, is that there's a deep set firmware there, which grows when the populations grow, that that firmware inhabits, who have been fighting Christians forever and since, way back when. And that little firmware code is inside of a larger code. I mean, it's just, and we got to go against these guys, and we're professional victims. So, I mean, it's a little engine within an engine, right? And that little, I think if you were able to rewrite that cult firmware, that, hey, stop killing Christians or anybody, stop being a parasitoid, stop being a parasite, because we're talking about a structure that can't make its own country, right? Never has successfully made its own country. It just hasn't, right? And why? Because that's not how there's all sorts of species of globalists, right? There are the ones who want to, let's say, make everybody Christian, right? And so that we want you to be Christian, right? So that's a proselytizing, or Islam wants to proselytize Islam, or Hindus. There's a lot of Hindu supremacists as well, right? And so, which Americans haven't gotten a taste of that yet, but they soon will. And so, the value of going to India, and so that's that sort of globalism, right? Then there's other globalists who are just into, there's like Satanist level stuff. I mean, I found this in a bookstore the other day. That's what is this from? 1972. They wouldn't sell me the magazine, but I asked them if they would sell me the advertisement for it.
Oh wow.
So yeah, and this was right beside it, and I noticed this is in Bangkok, and this is 1972, and I noticed,
shit.
and remember, and look at that, and this is. I noticed these women. I'm like, hey, that's the same shape of this. I said, Masako, my wife, I was like, is that wait, is this far enough back? Can you tell? Like the women are in the same shape as the thing. I can't see now because I'm back. You see? They're the same shape.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. And and they're always telling us, I say they, it's not Jews or whatever. It's some other architecture, which includes Jews, which includes, like the Catholics are deeply behind the invasions too. Amy Pope just met with the Pope. It's on her X. She was just with, I think it's at least the second time. Look at there. And so the Catholics are doing it too. And so, and as are others. Look at this. This is from April of 1963. This was in the same store. And I don't know if you can read it, but it says too many Kennedys, right?
Wow.
And that's RF. I mean, there's the president who would soon be shot, and his wife, president wife. And there's, that's the U.S. flag, obviously. Too many Kennedys. It says too many Kennedys right there, right? And right here, it says incorporating USA. Can you see that? I can't tell because I
can't tell, but you're pointing to it, incorporating USA.
Yeah, and so this is okay. So this is from April 1963, and it says clearly too many Kennedys by Alistair Cooke. Right. 6 months or so later, in November, he was killed.
They knew.
Coincidence?
That guy knew.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I picked this up, and I was like, I saw the date, and I was like, Masako, look at this. Look at the date. What does that mean? She goes, wait, he was shot in November. So we asked them if they would sell that to us, and we bought it. And yeah, I mean, stuff like this is all, the signs are all over the place, right? The signs are all over the place. Like here's one. We bought this one too. This is November 3rd, 1958 for 25 cents. Right? And it's talking about hypnosis. Old black art is now accepted medical tool, hypnosis. I mean, actually, anyway, I've spent years studying these various things. And so this all probably looks very different to me than it does to somebody just walking right in that's new to it. But
no, I think it's fascinating. All right, listen.
So one more thing. We found this one. And they actually sold this one to us. And what year is this one? This one is 1967. How U.S. indifference aided Nazi murder of 6 million Jews, right? Let's just get right down to the beef of it here. 6 million is bullshit. That's obviously a lie, right? And so you can...
Why'd you say that? Why'd you say that?
Because you can see that 6 million number has been used. This is in Look magazine, and it's November... What does it say? 1967. November 14th, 1967. Look magazine. And, that 6 million number was used over and over and over generations before. You can find it. It's used over, and it's in old books that I have. Just coincidentally, I'm like, there's that 6 million again. And it's always about, 6 million Jews are in danger in Ukraine. And it was used over and over and over back into the 1800s. And so where did that come from? So we're talking about people that are very big into numerology. Recently, a few weeks ago, I was thinking about that, and I was like, wait a minute. So I pulled out my calculator, and I put 1 over 6 million, and just as a little number thing. And it's, it was 0.166666667, right? And actually 6 million is 6 followed by 6 zeros. Now, I'm not going to get into the, oh, no, there you go with that conspiracy theory stuff. But I tell you what, the people who've studied this long enough won't say that. It's the super just walking off the street, just woke up this morning, or just like not even woke up, but just got up out of the bed and hear that. And they go, this is crazy. But it's not, because the numerology thing is absolutely massive in many cultures, right? Like, for instance, here, or I'm not in Japan right now. In Japan, or let's say China. You go to China, you go to hotels. Many of the hotels don't have a 4th floor. They don't have a 4th floor because 4 is associated with death, right? And you won't get on a flight 4444 by China Air, right? There ain't gonna be no. There ain't no Chinese is gonna get on flight 4444. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna be like, what? You think I'm getting on that? Right? And Japanese too. They don't like the number 4 either, right? So I mean, these numbers actually are very particular and very important, and that's why I even thought to just invert 1 over 6 million recently, and I was just like, well, that's strange, because there is something going on. I don't know what the base of it is, but you can see that there's a lot of smoke there. But anyway, the 6 million number is clear bullshit. I'm not saying that a lot of Jews didn't get killed, but I am saying there was a lot more Polish, right? I am saying there was a lot more Russians, and there was a lot more of everybody. but they're professional victims, and that's part of the architecture of manipulation architecture, right? There's architectures of manipulation that include victimization. Like when I grew up going to church, and my basic firmware is definitely Christian, right? Like I do believe in the 10 commandments, and that's my basic. I think the Bible's like a survival manual. You know what I mean? It's like it's got a lot of wisdom in there. So that's my basic firmware. But even as a child, I remember like, why are we, I mean, we're always like claiming, I could see that as a young teenager, that we're victims. Why are we taught that we're always victims? Somebody's always treating us bad, right? Because we're Christians. I'm like, nobody treats me bad because, you know, I mean, maybe they do somewhere else in those other countries, but so it's not just the Jews. Like if you go to Nagasaki, Masako and I just spent a month in Nagasaki. Nagasaki is very important in Japan. Nagasaki was the landing spot of globalism, right? For centuries. And the first ones that came there were the Portuguese. And because when Pope Alexander VI, when he drew the lines, the first treaty was 1494, Treaty of Tordesillas. Then he drew the other line about 30 years later, and Japan was on the Portuguese side. Next thing you know, Portuguese have gone around Africa, shot around Goa. They're burning people in the Inquisition. They're up here, went right up this river, and right by me. They were up in Ayutthaya, in Thailand, or Siam back then. They were in Indonesia. They ended up in Nagasaki, right? And it was Jesuits. So in 1549-ish, if my memory is correct, Xavier was there, right? He was one of the original, I think, 7 Jesuits, right? And so Xavier was in 1549. I think he was in Nagasaki. And if that's not right, it's very close. And I think it's right. But anyway, let's see. But so he was there. And keep in mind, they were doing inquisitions back then. They were like burning people. I've got a bunch of the old original books, man. I mean, they're like, you know, creaking pages, and you have to read those old letters that are hard to read and stuff, you know. And so, I mean, they were burning them alive in Lisbon. They were burning them alive in Spain as well, and over in Italy and whatnot. So, but they're now over in, I'm talking Jesuits, over in Japan. And now if you go to Nagasaki, there's probably somebody from Nagasaki will watch this. And you look up on the 26 martyrs. They're up on that hill, which we were just at multiple times. In fact, we were in the library with the priest in that museum, Masako. We were in the private library with the priest, Jesuit priest. And he, you know, gave us access for a half a day. And it was really, really fun. And but what I'm getting to is now the Jesuits are up there like, we're the martyrs. The Japanese, those savage Japanese killed us. Oh, hell no. You were over there doing inquisitions, burning people alive in Goa, in India. In India. And doing the same thing over in Lisbon and doing the same thing. I mean, the Japanese knew that, right? Because they were doing international trade then too. They weren't closed down yet. Japanese had a colony right up the river here at Ayutthaya. Japanese colony, right? Japanese village, they called it. And so in the Portuguese were up there too. They knew all about this stuff. So the Jesuits sponsored a rebellion in Japan, Shimibara Rebellion, right? And so, long story short, some of them apparently were killed, but they sponsored a rebellion, right? They were trying to conquer Japan, but now they're professional victims. There's been a movie about it. If you ask people that have seen the movie, they're like, oh, they were just over there spreading Christianity, and those savage Japanese pagans murdered them all. It's like you were kidnapping Japanese because you were Portuguese. Portuguese were famous for burning people, making slaves. That's why Brazil is mostly black and speaking Portuguese today, right? Because they were taking slaves from Africa. And that, you know, and on the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas, that was, you know, Brazil was part of Portugal, and there was their territory. And so I mean, they were out here victimizing everybody around the world that they could get their hands on. And the Japanese were like, oh no, we're more organized than those Indians are, right? You can burn Indians in Goa, but we'll kill you, right? You know, the Japanese, you know, they're smart, they're organized. So all the trade that was the Japanese allowed was from Nagasaki, right? So if you're in Nagasaki, especially if you're a historian, you should plan like a couple weeks. I mean, this is an intense place of study. We spent more than a month. I'd say 5 weeks probably. And we were, you know, going all the old bookstores, the whole works, right? And but at the end of the day, the Japanese, or actually then the Spanish got involved, and the Spanish of course took Philippines and whatnot, and the Spanish had a plan. They were going to conquer Japan and then raise an army in Japan to attack China, right? Which didn't work because the Japanese were too smart. They had intelligence all over the place, right? So the Japanese started calling the Spanish and the Portuguese, they called them Nanban. Nanban means southern barbarians, right? They didn't want the southern barbarians. They kicked them out, but they let the Dutch come in. So the Dutch had a colony down there, the Dutch East India Company. So that was their furthest colony away, right? And the Dutch didn't proselytize or any of that stuff. And you can still go to their tiny little island that they kept the Dutch on. We were there, multiple days in recent months. And go to Nagasaki, you'll see the Dutch old trading post. The Dutch were allowed to be there. Chinese were allowed to be there in a different area nearby. And anyway, at the end of the day, they kept the Nanban out. But the Nanban, they're still playing victim. They got the statues of the 26 martyrs up on the hill there in Nagasaki, and the Japanese just allow it to be there. It's like they're pretending that you slaughtered them after they tried to overthrow Japan. It's built into the firmware, right? It's always like, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to always think of yourself as the victim. It's very dangerous. It'll make you into a genocidal maniac, right?
Yeah.
And
dude,
yeah,
I couldn't agree more. Just FYI, you don't know this yet, but I grew up in a cult. I grew up in a it's difficult to explain it because I'd like to say it's a Muslim cult, but if you ask all the Muslims who are not in this cult, they don't think of my cult as being a Muslim cult. They think of us as, whatever. But basically, my cult grew up in India around the late 1800s, and this guy said, "I am the Jesus, Messiah, come back." And
right.
So I grew up in that cult, and even as a kid, deep down inside me, I was like, "This is weird."
You can feel it when you're a kid,
dude. You can feel it. So
it's like your BS sensors start early, actually,
dude.
Yeah.
Big time. So I'm in Scotland, in this little Asian community, and I'm in this cult, and I'm like, "Nah, it's just fucking weird. It's not. I don't know about it. It's just not right." And then I go to university and I meet.
Wait,
all
were
these
you born in India? I mean,
no,
you were born there
in Scotland.
You were born in Scotland, but
Glasgow.
How did you get into the cult? How'd you get into the cult?
I was born into it.
Oh, so the cult was transplanted. Is that right?
Yeah. So, my parents came over. So they're migrants. My parents came over when they're 16, 17 years old. Mm-hmm. So they came over in the 1960s. I was born in 75. So they've come over. They're part of the cult, right? They don't think it's a cult. This is the thing. I'm telling you, no one in a cult thinks they're in a cult. Everybody thinks that's their normal religion and everyone else just doesn't know. So we were taught that, this is the purest form of Islam. We're the up-to-date Muslims, and everyone else
always that, isn't it?
Everyone else is out of date and doesn't know any good. And we're the best of the best. And we're being persecuted. We're being persecuted in India and in Pakistan and all over the place. And that's why there's so many now in the UK and America, because we're persecuted and we're the victims. And all this stuff. And then I go to university and I meet all these other Muslims, and they go, "What kind of Muslim are you?" I'm like, "I'm an Ahmadi Muslim." They're like, "You're not a fucking Muslim. You're in some weird cult." I'm like, "Damn it, I knew it." I'm like, "I knew it." So yeah, I but it's hard, when the cult's got a grip on you, your family, your extended family, your social circle. But I left that cult when I was about 30. Basic, and the thing is,
surrounded by cults,
dude. 100%. I was gonna say, once you leave a cult, either you jump straight into another one, or your spidey sense is super wired, and you see all the cults, and you're like, "Nah, I'm not having any of that shit." So thankfully,
you see your opposite.
Yeah. So thankfully, I didn't jump into another cult. What happened was I was like, cult.
Right.
Cult.
And at some point, you're like, I mean, it's a jungle. I mean, it's just and you can be in you can be in multiple cults. They're not always mutually exclusive.
100%. So you could be an Ahmadi Muslim cult, in the NHS cult, in the climate change cult, in the COVID cult. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. But But these cults, I mean, they're quite powerful. I mean, look at this guy. I'm just going to
They're
show
like
you.
firmwares. They're firmwares. And it's like, okay, I'm going to close Microsoft Excel now and open Microsoft Word. That's my other cult. All right.
So look at this
I've
guy.
got to leave that cult and go into the other one.
Yeah, so this guy, Kareem Ahmed Khan, he's a prosecutor for the International Criminal Court. And he was going to say, you know, like Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested. He's part of that cult that I used to be part of.
Oh,
I mean,
I wish I could screenshot that. Oh, man. I'm going to ask you about it. What's his name? I'll look him up.
Kareem Khan. Kareem Khan. Head of the prosecution for the International Criminal Court.
Oh.
So yeah, there you go. Isn't that fascinating? Fascinating.
Yeah.
And there's another guy that I was a childhood friend with. His name was Nabil Qureshi. His dad was in the US Navy and they were stationed in Dunoon, just off of Glasgow. And he grew up though and rejected his cult, but I think he went straight into another cult. He became quite this Christian pastor. He had this massive following in America. And he was like, you know, I remember speaking to him on the phone once and he was like, Jesus spoke to me and God has spoken to me and I hear the voices in my head. And I was like, oh, dude, that's too much. But if you look up Nabil Qureshi, he's dead now. He had a massive following, massive Christian following because he was like this ex-Muslim, ex-Ahmadi cult member who then became a Christian. And it was like, oh, man.
I call that vine swinging. Vine swinging. Yeah. Actually, I got that from a high school friend. When I still have friends from high school. He just noticed at one point. He's like, some girls will have a boyfriend, but they don't like that boyfriend, but they'll never release that boyfriend until they've got their hand on another one.
Monkey branching.
What do you call it?
Monkey branching. Yeah.
You've heard that before?
Yeah.
I never heard that before. I never heard that until you just said it. But he called it vine swinging, so it probably came from the same. And I was like, because we were high school students, so we laughed. But then over time, I'm like, oh, there's all kinds of vine swinging, right? There's like, whether it's, you know, obviously you don't want to quit one job until you have another job, you know, that sort of thing. So that's, I mean, sometimes it makes it completely perfect sense, but it also can happen with cults. They're like, I don't like this one. Like when you go to India, you'll find a lot of Westerners who are specifically, and they'll say it all the time. They're like, I'm looking for a guru. And I'm like, well, you're going to find one. Yeah, trust me. You're going to find one.
But this is the thing.
They're everywhere.
People want to feel like they belong to something and they also want to be led, and it's quite scary. And that's part of the problem that we're in. Humanity is never going to get out of this shit show as long as we allow predators to predate us. You know, like
I want to belong to something too, right? I want to. It's a natural thing, but you can't let that be your weakness, because that's what they'll predate on, if that's the accurate word.
I don't know what the accurate word is. Listen, but before we talk about World War III, God, this is becoming an epic podcast. 3 hours, Jesus. Right, it's been a long time.
Long?
Yeah, it's a long time since it got to 3 hours. But listen, can I ask you something? How'd you fund all this, traveling around the world, going to the Darien Gap? I mean, I hope Brett Weinstein paid for his ticket. I mean, how'd you fund all this? Who's your CIA backer?
CIA, right? Yeah, it's funny. The amount of CIA people I know, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting one. You know what I mean? It's like a joke. I'm like, there's more people that work for CIA than work for like McDonald's and Starbucks and 7-Eleven combined. You know what I mean? It's like this. You know, it's funny. I'll answer that question. But as I was flying over to from Texas last time to Japan, which would be a few months ago, so I left Texas. I landed at the airport at LAX. And I go to the business class lounge, waiting, right? Because I fly business when I can, because first class is a waste of money and economy is a waste of time, right? So this is Mama Bear's just right. I get to work and without wasting money. You know,
yeah.
I walk in, and there's an old director of CIA, old person I know, is Dave Petraeus. So I'm like, Dave. So I walked up and we started talking, and he was in the business class lounge of United Airlines. I was like, I was like, why aren't you on the little jet? You know what I mean? Like, you know, and because you know he works at Kohlberg, Kravis and Roberts, which is an incredible firm, right?
Yeah.
And you know they probably got a whole air force of little jets. I was like, why are you in business class? Anyway, we started talking about some other stuff, like our mutual acquaintance, Eric Carilla, who was running the war, and he was the one bombing Iran at the time, actually. And I did 5 months of combat with Eric Carilla. He got shot right in front of me, actually. And actually, it's online in a dispatch called Gates of Fire. I was actually shooting photos of him when he got shot. But then he became CENTCOM commander, and he just retired from the military in the last, I don't know, month or so, right? And we're talking about that sorts of thing. Anyway, what I'm getting to is, I'm probably one of the very few people in the world who have met 3 directors of CIA, who was personally, privately, and was privately invited by all 3, right? So, I mean, it was like, not me asking. I've never asked for interviews and that sort of thing. And it's because they have seen how accurate my war predictions are. I mean, they are quite accurate, right? And, but I've never worked for them. I've never worked for, I mean, people reach out all the time. New York Times tried to hire me and that sort of thing. A lot of people thought because I was in special forces and then I lived over in Poland and yada, yada, yada. They're like, you must be CIA. And I'm like, I know it fits the fact pattern perfectly, but it's actually not true. But it fits the fact pattern. There's no question about it. Because a lot of people that were in, special forces was actually formed, the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, split into CIA and special forces, right? And I was in special forces. And so, but actually I've never been. So how do I fund it? So I told you about the time when I was 19 and I was attacked and fist fight and the guy died. I never trusted media since then. But I've always been studying my whole life. I was off in business. I made some money in business, that sort of thing. And next thing you know, I'm running around Asia. 9/11 happens. And I'm like, wow, second airplane hits. And I was like, wow, Al-Qaeda is attacking us. I mean, right from the beginning, I thought it was Al-Qaeda. I didn't realize at that point, it would have been way outside of my Overton window to say that that was an inside job, right? I never would have believed it. People were saying it. I'm like,
now do you believe it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty obvious at this point. But at that time, that was way outside of my Overton window. I didn't have that knowledge base that I've developed over time. So anyway, so I'm running around over in India and I'm like, what happened? So I'm studying anthropology and mythology and that sort of thing, because I'm curious how this happened. I'm going down to Indonesia and all these different places. I'm just going up to Tibet and China and looking around Thailand here, of course, Vietnam. And I'm just looking at things, trying to learn more about this world and try to figure out how all this works. And finally, I kept talking with some of my friends who were in the wars, because 9/11 happened, and then I came over to Asia for my first real serious trips, right? And a lot of my friends ended up in the wars, old Green Berets. They went off to Iraq, mostly Iraq. And they were asking me, why aren't you in the war? You're a writer and all that stuff. Because I'd written my first book, Danger Close. I'm like, I'm not going to a war, man. It's dangerous. And, there's no chance I'm going to a war. I mean, it's just like cuckoo, right? And I'm just studying. I'm out here learning things. And so, but then over time, one of my old teammates, Richard Ferguson, was killed in Iraq. And he was one of my Green Beret teammates that we had been training to parachute into Poland together. And then within 24 hours, another of my high school friends was killed in Iraq. And his name was Scott Helvenston. And he was actually the youngest Navy SEAL. We used to work out together in high school. We used to be on the same football team and work out together in the gym. He was a super stud. So Scott Helvenston was the youngest Navy SEAL in history, actually. And so they got killed, both in Iraq. Scott worked for Blackwater, he was a contractor, and then he got hanged off the bridge with his partners there, right, in Fallujah. And so that's when the United States started really. So I went to Scott's funeral in Florida, and I went to Fergie's funeral up in Colorado. So at Scott's funeral was a bunch of SEALs and that sort of thing, and old high school friends, because I went to high school with him. So, and his best friend was a good friend of mine, Eddie Twyford, very close friend, and we're all these journalists came from all around the world, even Japan. We're at Scott's mother's house outside. Like, we're talking with her, and they're like outside with the big lenses and all that stuff. It was just, I was like, what is going on? Because I've been over in India and doing all that sort of stuff, China. I come back, Scott and Fergie got killed. So I went to both of their funerals. So at the Scott's funeral, people were like, you're a writer. Why don't you go off to the war? And I'm like, that's Navy SEAL stuff. You guys have fun, right? And I go to Fergie's funeral in Colorado. There's a bunch of Green Berets and CIA type people. And again, they're like, why don't you go off to the war? And then, I'm like, I'm not going to. Look, Scott's dead. Fergie's dead. Why would I go to the war? But I start paying more attention to it at that point. And I realized, well, after Scott was killed in Fallujah, we started doing Operation Phantom Fury, and really Operation Phantom Fury was later that year. Started really attacking Fallujah, really hardcore, and then towards the end of the year, and it killed a ton of, basically did a Gaza on Fallujah almost, right? And but I wasn't there yet, so I was still doing my thing, not even thinking about going to war. But another friend of mine that I'd also gone to school with, Rodney Morris, he was a lieutenant colonel at that time in the 1st Infantry Division in Iraq. And Rodney used to call me up. We all went to high school together, like Scott and that sort of thing. Scott Helvenston, the SEAL that was dead. And so Rodney would call me up from Iraq, and he would be like, why don't you come over? I'm like, hey, I love you, Rodney, and all that stuff, but no, I'm not coming to the war. And so, but as we go on into 2004, because remember, Scott was killed in, I think, April 30th, right? Or March 31st, I think, 2004. And I think that's, or March 30th or 31st. And anyway, so through April, the United States and Britain were really attacking Fallujah hard, right? I'm like, this war is getting out of control. And I went to their funerals. And then as the year unfolds, my friend Rodney keeps calling me from Tikrit, Iraq. So, come to the war. And I'm like, no chance. And then we get into October, November, and that's when Operation Phantom Fury starts, the second attack on Fallujah, because in Ramadi, right? And that was when I said, wow, we're clearly losing the war. It's clearly a growing war. They're not dead enders or any of that stuff, right? So I said to Rodney, I said, okay, I'll come. So how do I get in? Because I don't have a job. I don't work for anybody. The last job I had that actually had a paycheck, I think, that from somebody else, I think, was Michael Jackson, right? When I did security for Michael Jackson when I was in school, right? So that was like, a long time ago in my 20s. So I don't work for any newspaper or magazine or anything. I've written my first book, Danger Close, but so we used that first book, Danger Close, as the reason to get me in. So I show up to Iraq. And, no sooner am I there, straight into mortar comes in, boom, hits a Humvee. It didn't even explode. It's like right by Rodney and me. I was like, it just went through the hood. It just like didn't explode. And, just stuff like that. So I said, who's in the most combat here? Right. And so who can I go out with that's in the most combat? This is why I didn't want to go to war, because I know how I am. Right. And so when I started getting close to it, because, I'll go to the gunfire, right? So the next thing you know, I'm like, okay, who's in the most combat and who will let me in? And it was Colonel Dana Petard. He was the brigade commander of like 1st Infantry Division down in Bakuba. So there I am, helicoptering down, machine gun shooting off the side of the helicopter on the way in. I'm like, wow, okay, here we are. And so, not when we were landing, I think they were test firing or something, but this is my first introductions, right? And so we land in Bakuba. Next thing you know, I'm starting to get into combat, right? And the next unit after that, I'm like, who's in more combat than these guys? So I end up in different units, and finally I end up in Mosul, and with the 124th Infantry Battalion, right? And the Deuce 4, and this is the one that Bruce Willis started paying attention to. So I was with them for 5 months. We did a tremendous amount of combat. Ended up being the most decorated battalion in the entire Iraq War, right? 173 casualties, I think, right? And so the commander was Eric Kurilla, who would end up becoming the CENTCOM commander, who was just bombing Iran recently, right? That's Eric, right? So my first mission with Eric was, that guy was an unbelievable commander, actually. Incredibly courageous, incredibly intelligent, which actually disturbs me later. But at the time, it was the first mission. And we go out there and they car bomb, and anyway, it goes on and on and on with fatalities and that sort of thing. So we get back to the base, and I was like, wow, your men did very well out there. It was terrible car bombing. and fire, people burning to death, that sort of thing. And so quite horrible. But I said, your men did incredibly well out there. And I said, wow, you guys operate like a special operations unit. Actually, he ended up being commander of, I think, JSOC and all this sort of stuff too. Ranger Regiment. He was commander of all. He ended up being command of these guys, but later. But I said, wow, that was amazing. And like his behavior during that attack was very amazing too. I mean, he went into a burning vehicle and was pulling guys. He had to hold his breath to go into the Stryker vehicle. And that was the first mission with him. And I said, and what did I say? I said something like, I'd like to stay with your unit a little longer, because I'd only was supposed to stay with him a week or two, I think. I don't remember. And I said, I'd like to stay with you guys a little longer. And he goes, well, you can stay as long as you can take it. Right. So I was like, okay. So I stayed with them for 5 months until that was it, until they were ripping out, until they left. Right. And tremendous amount of combat. Eric got shot in front of me. He was the last casualty of the whole unit. He was the 173rd casualty. He got hit 3 times right in front of me. Broke his leg, broke his femur in half. You're an orthopedic surgeon. You know what an AK will do to a femur. And he kept fighting, though. He was on the ground, and I've got photos of it because I was shooting at 5 frames a second. So I was actually shooting at 5 frames a second when he got shot. So I'm like, and he's like, getting hit, right? And he rolls. So I've got him rolling at 5 frames a second, and he's on the ground, and his leg is twisting under him. He pulls it out, and he keeps fighting. And anyway, the firefight got even more intense from there. But long story short, ended up hand-to-hand combat. So how did I fund this thing? So at one point, I'm like, I can't afford this. This is costing me like $1,000 a day just to breathe air here, right? And I'm burned through everything I've got to be here, anything that I'm willing to keep throwing out there. And so I said, you know what? I'll put up one of those PayPal things, right? And so I put up a PayPal button, and that was back in, some people say I'm like the father of this blogging that we're doing now, because when I did it, there were other people blogging already, definitely. But to really bring it to the higher level, like Los Angeles Times, I think they had like a front page article, I think, and it said that was like the 83rd biggest website in the world or something, right? And it was just me and my laptop, like this right in front of me. It was just me and a laptop.
Wow.
That's it. And my camera. I had a prosumer camera, and that's it. And so when I put up the PayPal button, next thing you know, Bruce Willis is calling me up. He wants to do a movie based on my life. So we didn't do that because I stayed in combat and other reasons. I just kept going. So I went over to Afghanistan. I went back to Iraq, back to Afghanistan. I go back and forth between Iraq and Afghanistan. Then I went out down to Mindanao with that insurgency down there, came and covered some of the fighting here, back in the wars. And so funded it by self-funding. So my funders were usually quite small, right? And $5, $10, $100, right? So nobody had the influence to just cut me off, right? And so that distributed. So that's why you'll see me. People are like, "Well, he's pro-Bush," and I'm like, "Boy, they're going to be surprised," because over time, what I'm really doing is telling what I think is actually happening. So sometimes it looks like you're on somebody's side, and I'm actually just calling the ball where I think it actually is landing. So sometimes it looks like, well, you're on those guys' side. And I'm just saying they're doing really great here, and I think we're making progress there. And then I went over to Afghanistan in 2006, and they're like, well, you just suddenly turned against everybody. I'm like, no, because I think we're losing the war here. And then I wrote 12 major dispatches in 2006. It was like 12 dispatches saying, I think we're losing the war in Afghanistan. And that made my funding go, it's like, and I went back to Iraq, and it went a little bit up, and it would go. So I started going back to Iraq to make money so I could go back to Afghanistan. So I would actually go back to the war in Iraq. Well, first I wanted to cover it, but also because I was losing money in Afghanistan. So I spent 2 years in Afghanistan. In Iraq, you would make money, but so I spent 2 in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan. And so, but I would have to go make money to keep saying what's going on over there. And there's people that tried to hire me, New York Times, many people have tried to hire me, never has worked. And so at the end of the day, I know it sounds suspicious because people are but at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, look at all the people that I go after. I've gone after President Trump, which really cost me tremendously, right? It cost me tremendously to go after Trump. Same. And I knew it before I hit send on the first one. I'm like, this is going to cost money. You know what I'm saying? Sure did, right? And but at the end of the day, truth is an investment, and and expenses are lies are expenses, especially in a state of war. I mean, dude, you want to lie to the enemy, of course, but you want.
Dude, I would be so rich if I'm like, I'm a former Muslim, I'm now a born-again Christian, and I believe in Zionism and MAGA Trump. The money would be coming in. Like,
for sure.
That's
for sure.
That's not what it's about. Yeah. That's not what it's about. What we're doing is trying to get to the truth.
They'd have you on the tour. They'd have you on the global tour. They'd have you on the global tour, and they'd have all kinds of people throwing hate mail at you and stuff, and it would just build you up.
Yeah. But listen. I have to go and collect my next guest from the train station. He's coming now, Anthony Samaroff. Dude, I love you.
Anthony. All right.
I love you. Like, you're a brother from another mother. Listen, we
have very similar personalities. It's very strange. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to get you back, though, in a few weeks' time. Because we haven't even talked about World War III yet.
Yeah, well, it's not going anywhere except bigger. But, yeah, I'll be back in Japan so we can talk from Japan.
Okay. All right, listen. I love you so much. Say hi to Misako.
Yeah.
Misako. Tell Misako, I'm really sorry for taking so much of your time. You're a legend. And, before we finish, you're only 80% uploaded. So when I exit, just leave your browser open until it says 100% uploaded.
Will do.
Can you send me all your links that you want me to post and an up-to-date photo of your beautiful self?
Right.
Can I give you my email address?
Yeah, please.
You got pen and paper?
Yep.
So it's Ahmed, Ahmad, no E's, Ahmed. And it's not Ahmad, just Ahmed, Ahmad at docmalik.com. DOCMALIK.com.
Okay. Ahmed at
docmalik.com. DOCMALIK.com. Doc Malik.
At docmalik.com.
That's it.
Okay. All right. Let me spell it back out. Okay. All right. It says Ahmed. This is Alpha Hotel Mike Alpha Delta.
I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.